Die Nachrichten am Sonntag. Herzlich willkommen, liebe Zuschauer. Und das sind unsere Themen heute. Columbia-Absturz. Technische Probleme, vermutlich Ursache für Unglück. Der Flug der Columbia war möglicherweise von Beginn an zum tragischen Scheitern verurteilt. Der Defekt, der die 7 Astronauten das Leben kostete, soll bereits in den Minuten des Starts aufgetreten sein. Das gab eine unabhängige Expertenkommission bekannt, die einen Tag nach dem Absturz der Raumfähre zur Aufklärung des Unglücks einberufen wurde.
Trauerstimmung heute Morgen vor dem NASA-Hauptquartier. Erschüttert über den dramatischen Absturz der Columbia legen Menschen zum Gedenken an die toten Blumen nieder. Gleichzeitig wird die Bergung der zahlreichen Wrackteile unter Mithilfe des FBI fortgesetzt. Die gewaltige Explosion in 65 Kilometer Höhe hat die Überreste der Columbia über mehrere Bundesstaaten verteilt. In Texas haben Bergungstrupps erste Leichenteile gefunden. In Louisiana wurden größere Wrackteile, ein Helm und ein Abzeichen geborgen. Die Behörden haben Anwohner dazu aufgerufen, die möglicherweise giftigen Trümmerteile nicht anzufassen. Einen Tag nach dem Absturz der 22 Jahre alten Raumfähre läuft die Ursachenforschung auf Hochtouren. Die bisherige Bilanz: der Tod der 7 Astronauten hätte womöglich verhindert werden können. NASA-Experten haben jetzt zugegeben, dass sich bereits beim Start des Shuttle eine Schaumstoffisolierung der Trägerraketen gelöst und den linken Flügel der Raumfähre gestreift hat. Doch Konsequenzen wurden daraus nicht gezogen. Gestern beim Wiedereintritt der Columbia in die Erdatmosphäre könnte ein Schaden am Hitzeschild die Katastrophe ausgelöst haben. Die ersten Anzeichen, dass es Probleme bei der Landung geben könnte, erreichten uns um kurz vor 8 Ortszeit. Wir bemerkten, dass die Sensoren des linken Flügels ausgefallen waren. Beide, die inneren und äußeren Hitzesensoren am linken Flügel, wiesen Störungen auf. Dann gab es einen Druckverlust bei den Reifen und schließlich Probleme bei der Steuerung am linken Flügel. Es kam zu einer extremen Hitzewelle. Kurz vor der geplanten Landung in Cape Canaveral endete der 28. Flug der US-Raumfähre Columbia auf tragische Weise. 65 Kilometer von der Erde entfernt ist die Besatzung zusammen mit dem Shuttle bei rund 1600 Grad Celsius verbrannt.
Der Absturz der Columbia hat weltweit für Trauer und Entsetzen gesorgt. Das Unglück ist ein schrecklicher Verlust, so US-Präsident Bush wörtlich. An Bord der Raumfähre waren 7 Astronauten, 5 Männer und 2 Frauen, darunter auch der erste Israeli im All. Bundeskanzler Schröder sprach dem amerikanischen Volk sein tiefes Beileid aus.
Optimistisch und ausgelassen wirkte die 7-köpfige Crew der Columbia kurz vor dem Start am 16. Januar. Die 41 Jahre alte Laurel Clark war Ärztin bei der US Navy und Mutter einer Tochter. Sie sollte zum ersten Mal mit einem Shuttle ins All fliegen. Genau wie ihr Kollege David Brown. Schon als Kind dachte ich, dass Astronauten und ihr Job das Coolste sind, was man machen kann. Die zweite Frau an Bord, Kalpana Chawla. Die 41-jährige erfahrene NASA-Astronautin stammt aus Indien. Wie sie galten auch Commander Rick Husband und Pilot William McCool als routinierte Astronauten. Er war der ganze Stolz Israels. Oberst Ilan Ramon, der erste Israeli im All. Es ist toll, dass ich die Träume meiner Landsleute erfüllen kann. Um ein Zeichen zu setzen, hatte der Sohn einer Auschwitz-Überlebenden die Zeichnungen eines kleinen Jungen mit an Bord genommen, der im Konzentrationslager Auschwitz ums Leben gekommen war. Der 48-jährige Ingenieur hinterlässt seine Frau und 4 Kinder. In ganz Israel wehten die Flaggen heute auf Halbmast. Ministerpräsident Sharon begann die wöchentliche Kabinettssitzung mit einer Trauerzeremonie. Der Tag wird kommen, an dem wir mehr Astronauten ins Weltall schicken werden. Ich bin sicher, dass jeder einzelne dieser Astronauten die Erinnerung an Ilan Ramon im Herzen tragen wird. Nur einer hatte zugegeben, vor der Mission etwas nervös zu sein. Auf dem Rückflug werde ich nur da sitzen und daran zurückdenken, was wir in den 16 Tagen im All alles erlebt haben. Ich werde sicherlich froh sein, den Flug hinter mir zu haben. Dieses Gefühl aber konnten Michael Anderson und seine Kollegen nicht mehr erleben.
Der Absturz der Columbia ist auch ein Desaster für den Ausbau der internationalen Raumstation ISS. Bislang wurden die NASA-Shuttles zum Transport schwerer Bauteile genutzt. Weltweit gibt es keinen Ersatz. Der unbemannte russische Frachter Progress, der heute planmäßig in Baikonur abhob, ist nur für die Beförderung leichter Güter wie Lebensmittel und Treibstoff geeignet.
Die internationale Raumstation ISS ist das wichtigste Projekt der bemannten Raumfahrt. Für die Astronauten, die sich zurzeit an Bord der Station befinden, besteht keine akute Gefahr. Notfalls kommen sie mit einer russischen Sojus-Kapsel zur Erde zurück. Ein Ausfall der Space-Shuttle-Flüge hätte dennoch gravierende Folgen. Die Raumfähren sind als Lastentransporter unentbehrlich. Wir werden jetzt ganz sicher die bevorstehenden Flüge streichen. Das gilt so lange, bis wir alle Informationen zusammen haben und den endgültigen Grund für dieses Desaster kennen. Auch nach der Challenger-Tragödie im Januar 1986, bei der 7 Astronauten starben, wurden alle Space-Shuttle-Flüge für 2 Jahre gestoppt. Damals explodierte eine Antriebsrakete kurz nach dem Start. Trotz der tödlichen Katastrophen galten die wiederverwendbaren Raumfähren bislang als sicher. Jedenfalls sicherer als die früheren Wegwerfraketen. Denn auch beim Apollo-Programm lagen Triumph und Tragödie dicht beieinander. Der Höhepunkt war die erfolgreiche Mondlandung mit Apollo 11 am 20. Juli 1969. Doch das Jahrhundertprojekt hatte tödlich begonnen. Die Astronauten Grissom, White und Chaffee erstickten bei einem Apollo-1-Test qualvoll. Ein Funke hatte die mit reiner Sauerstoffatmosphäre gefüllte Kapsel entzündet. Nur knapp wurde bei Apollo 13 ein Desaster verhindert. Die Kapsel mit den Astronauten Lovell, Hayes und Swigert an Bord drohte nach einer Explosion für immer ins All abzudriften. Nach einer tagelangen Odyssee war der heikelste Teil der Mission die Rückkehr in die Erdatmosphäre. Die Männer von Apollo 13 wurden gerettet. Der Unglücksflug bedeutete aber das Ende für das NASA-Mondflugprogramm. Sollten jetzt auch die Shuttle-Flüge gestrichen werden, wäre das Projekt ISS ernsthaft gefährdet. Eine neue Raumfährengeneration kommt frühestens 2015.
Es gibt also Hinweise auf die mögliche Unglücksursache. Professor Jesko von Puttkamer ist führender Manager bei der NASA. Herr von Puttkamer, ich begrüße Sie in Washington. Was passiert eigentlich, wenn so ein Hitzeschild beschädigt ist?
Naja, also an den meisten Stellen am Shuttle kann man beschädigte Stellen durchaus verkraften. Es hängt also ganz davon ab, wo die Beschädigung aufgetreten ist.
Wenn es tatsächlich
das heißt,
an der Tragfläche
welche
war?
Temperaturen auftreten. Wenn die Beschädigung in diesem Falle, falls es sich um eine solche handelt, an einer Flügelvorderkante auftrat, also an der linken Tragfläche, wie das vielleicht der Fall sein könnte, dann war das eine sehr heiße Stelle. Das waren Kohlenfaserkacheln vorne, die, wenn die beschädigt waren, natürlich zu einem sofortigen Durchschmelzen der darunterliegenden Aluminiumstruktur geführt haben und dadurch natürlich auch zu einem Zerreißen der Zelle und zu einem Absturz des Shuttles Columbia.
Man wusste von diesem Problem ja seit dem Start. Warum haben die Astronauten dann keinen Weltraumspaziergang gemacht und haben einfach mal nachgeschaut, wie es an der Tragfläche aussieht?
Ja, man wusste von diesem Problem eben nicht seit dem Start. Man wusste nur, dass offenbar ein Stück Schaumstoff, weiches Schaumstoff, sich vom Außentank gelöst hatte nach dem Abheben des Shuttles, kurz bevor wir in den Überschall eintraten. Das hat man auf einer Kamera gesehen. Ob nun dieser Schaumstoff wirklich die Tragfläche berührt oder beschädigt hat, wussten wir nicht. Im Weltraum konnten wir diese Flügelvorderkante nicht beobachten. Wir hatten diesmal keinen Roboterarm dabei, der ist zu Hause geblieben, mit dem wir normalerweise mit Hilfe einer Videokamera eine Außeninspektion hätten durchführen können. Und auch die Möglichkeit eines Weltraumausstieges der Astronauten zur Reparatur solcher Schadstellen existiert nicht. Dafür gibt es keine Technik, denn diese Kacheln sind recht komplexe Materialien, zu deren Ankleben spezielle Instrumente nötig sind.
Kann es einen Zusammenhang geben zwischen dem beschädigten Flügelteil und einem falschen Anstellwinkel, mit dem die Raumfähre in die Erdatmosphäre wieder eingetreten ist?
Ja, wenn da die Flügelvorderkante durchgeschmolzen ist oder beschädigt war, dann kann natürlich durch aerodynamische Kraft eine Taumelbewegung oder eine Veränderung des Anstellwinkels geschehen sein. Der Shuttle ist dann halt in Taumelbewegungen geraten und hat sich überschlagen. Das wäre eine Möglichkeit. Eine andere Möglichkeit ist, dass eine Schubdüse versagt hat oder einen falschen Impuls gegeben hat. Eine dritte Möglichkeit ist, dass eine der 3 Hilfsturbinen an Bord, die die Hydraulik betreiben, versagt hat oder explodiert ist. Es gibt also eine ganze Reihe von Möglichkeiten und wir können in dem Moment hier noch nicht zu irgendwie einer Ursache uns auf eine Ursache fokussieren. Wir müssen alle möglichen Ursachen untersuchen, und das ist im Augenblick der Fall.
Ein ehemaliger NASA-Manager erhebt heute im englischen Observer schwere Vorwürfe. Er sagt, bei der NASA wird seit Jahren auf Kosten der Sicherheit gespart. Was antworten Sie diesem Mann?
Ja, das ist völliger Unsinn. Bei uns steht Sicherheit an erster Stelle. Und auch wenn die Gelder nicht mehr so reichlich fließen wie früher, so sparen wir in erster Linie an der Leistungsfähigkeit und nicht an der Sicherheit. Das ist bei uns schon seit dem Challenger-Unglück vor 17 Jahren das allererste Gebot der Raumfahrt gewesen. Also Sicherheit ist Nummer 1. Und wenn irgendwie hier ein Zeichen bestanden hätte vor dem Start, dass etwas unsicher ist, wären wir nicht gestartet. Wir haben in den letzten Monaten wiederholt bewiesen, dass auch bei ganz kleinen Vorkommnissen, bei ganz kleinen Fehlerstellen, die sicherlich nicht kritisch waren, trotzdem ein Startverbot eingetreten ist, bis wir ganz sicher waren, dass wir sicher starten konnten.
Herr von Puttkammer, vielen Dank für diese Information. Ich danke Ihnen nach Washington. In Houston ist das Kontrollzentrum der NASA und von dort aus mussten die Mitarbeiter ohnmächtig den Absturz des Shuttles miterleben. Houston liegt in Texas, dort wo auch sehr viele Trümmerteile der Columbia gefunden wurden. Patricia Schlesinger ist in Houston. Frau Schlesinger, kann man denn von den gefundenen Trümmerteilen Rückschlüsse ziehen auf die Unglücksursache?
Das ist in der Tat hier das Ziel. Aber das Problem ist erstmal, diese Trümmerteile alle zu finden. Denn ein bisschen ist es die Frage, was Hobbywissenschaftler und Raritätensammler so übrig lassen. Denn die sind offensichtlich in Scharen hier im Einsatz, trotz immer wieder währender Warnungen der NATO, dass diese Teile durchaus auch giftig sein könnten. Aber die Luftwaffe ist im Einsatz. F-16 Kampfflugzeuge suchen jetzt diese Trümmerteile, suchen auch Leichenteile. All das soll dann später zur Aufklärung beitragen. Und man erhofft sich eigentlich, dass in den nächsten 2-3 Tagen hier einiges deutlicher wird, was wirklich diese Katastrophe ausgelöst hat.
Stimmt es denn, dass sogar schon Trümmerteile im Internet angeboten worden sind, über eBay?
Das habe ich auch gehört, konnte ich aber von hier aus nicht verifizieren, denn die NASA stellt uns hier leider keine Internetmöglichkeit zur Verfügung. Man glaubt es nicht, aber es ist so.
Die NASA steht ja unter einem enormen Druck. Wie kann man da unter diesen Umständen eine objektive Untersuchung sicherstellen?
Das wird im Grunde auf 2 Ebenen geschehen. Es wird eine Regierungskommission geben, das hat Präsident Bush schon angekündigt, unter Beteiligung der Luftwaffe und der Marine, soweit man weiß. Und es wird eben eine NASA-Kommission geben. Hier auf dem Gelände hinter mir wird die angeblich schon zusammengerufen. Die Untersuchungen konzentrieren sich, und das haben Sie eben ja gerade auch ausführlich erörtert, vermutlich auf die abgefallenen Hitzekacheln, die eben die Insassen dieser Raumfähre hätten schützen sollen beim Wiedereintritt in die Atmosphäre vor Verglühen. Übrigens ist das tatsächlich ein Schwachpunkt, der hier bei der NASA offensichtlich bekannt zu sein scheint. Entschuldigung, dieser Schwachpunkt scheint bekannt zu sein, denn die Techniker, mit denen man hier zu tun hat, reden von diesen Kacheln als NATO-Puzzle. Also, dass diese Teile ab und zu mal abfallen, ist offensichtlich nichts Neues.
Nach diesem erneuten Schock, wie denken da die Amerikaner über die Zukunft ihrer Raumfahrt?
Durchaus gespalten, denke ich. Erstmal ist Wut, Trauer, Entsetzen immer wieder die Frage, wie kann sowas passieren. Als ich gestern auf dem Weg hierher war an den Flughäfen, wo wir zwischenlanden mussten, Trauben von Menschen vor den Fernsehern, die immer wieder dieselben Szenen angucken mussten, weil immer wieder dasselbe gezeigt wurde natürlich. Und ich hörte immer wieder Stimmen, die sagten, immer wieder dieselben Bilder, immer wieder dieselben Fragen, dieses Warum, wie konnte das geschehen? Hatten wir das nicht am 11. September? Und merkwürdigerweise vergleichen die Menschen das damit, obwohl es kein Terroranschlag hier zu sein scheint. Ich habe aber gerade hier auf dem Gelände Gene Cernan getroffen. Das ist der Mann, der zuletzt auf dem Mond war, vor 30 Jahren. Er sagte mir, die Amerikaner denken doch eigentlich, wir müssen weitermachen. Es ist sehr traurig, was hier passiert ist, aber wir müssen weitermachen. Er sagte zu mir, Sie werden sehen, Ihre Enkel sind dann auf dem Mars. Und ich glaube, das ist etwas, was die Stimmung der amerikanischen Bevölkerung eher wiedergibt. Es ist jetzt furchtbar, es ist jetzt Trauer. Alle fragen nach dem Warum. Die Aufarbeitung tut Not. Aber dann kann es auch weitergehen, denn man ist auch stolz auf diese Missionen ins All.
Patricia Schlesinger, vielen Dank nach Houston in Texas. Die bemannte Raumfahrt, sie ist auch die Geschichte einer Konkurrenz zwischen den USA und der ehemaligen UdSSR. Erfolge und Unglücke gab es dabei auf beiden Seiten.
Das erste Weltraumunglück Amerikas war ein Erfolg der Gegenseite. Denn so fing der Wettlauf im All überhaupt an, mit dem sogenannten Sputnik-Schock. Die Sowjets ließen als erster erfolgreich einen Satelliten die Erde umkreisen. Und so blieb es von da an. Jeder Erfolg des einen war ein Rückschlag für den anderen und umgekehrt. 1960 starben bei dieser Explosion 90 Soldaten und Mitarbeiter des sowjetischen Raketenprogramms. Solch ein Unglück war im Wettstreit der Systeme zugleich eine schmerzliche Niederlage und wurde auch so wahrgenommen. Ein ähnlich absurd tragischer Zwischenfall kostete 1967 3 Amerikaner das Leben. Streng genommen war auch dies kein Raumfahrtunglück. Apollo 1 wurde zunächst am Boden getestet. Bei der Startsimulation löste ein Kurzschluss einen Brand aus. Alle Insassen starben auf der Rampe von Cape Canaveral. 2 Jahre später war der Wettlauf im All entschieden. Amerika hisste seine Flagge auf dem Mond. Doch der Triumph schützte nicht vor weiteren Tragödien. Nicht alle gingen so glimpflich aus wie die Krise von Apollo 13. Houston, wir haben ein Problem. Diese scheinbar gelassen ausgesprochene Alarmmeldung der Besatzung an den Kontrollraum ist in Amerika zu einem geflügelten Wort für alle schwierigen Situationen geworden. Immerhin konnten die Apollo 13 Astronauten gerettet werden. Jahre nach dem Apollo-Programm landeten Raumfähren 7 bis 8 Mal pro Jahr nach erfolgreich absolvierten Ausflügen ins All. Damit verlor die Raumfahrt etwas von ihrer Aura. Sie wurde fast ein Stück Normalität. Space Shuttle, frei übersetzt Weltraumpendelbus, nannte man die Raumfähren nicht von ungefähr. Folgerichtig beschloss die NASA 1986, auch einfache Bürger in den Bus zusteigen zu lassen. Doch gerade weil die Raumfahrt Teil amerikanischer Normalität geworden zu sein schien, schockierte die Explosion der Challenger vor 17 Jahren so tief. Ich hätte unter den Opfern sein können, das konnte sich nun jeder sagen. Die Gefahren bestehen weiter, wie die Katastrophe von gestern auf tragische Weise deutlich macht. Und sie haben Folgewirkung. So kann der nächste Shuttleflug erst starten, wenn die Unfallursache der Columbia restlos geklärt ist. Wissenschaftler in der internationalen Raumstation sind aber auf regelmäßige Versorgungsflüge angewiesen. Unter ihnen Russen. Die Rivalen von einst sind nun Partner im All.
Die Columbia-Katastrophe, sie hat Amerika in Schock versetzt. Tomboro in Washington, in einer solchen Situation erwarten die Amerikaner Halt und Führung durch ihren Präsidenten. Wie hat George Bush das bis jetzt gemacht?
Bush hat sich entschieden, sich an einem großen Vorgänger zu orientieren, an Ronald Reagan, seinem Parteifreund. Der hat vor 17 Jahren bei der Challenger-Katastrophe über die Opfer gesagt, sie berührten bei ihrem Flug das Antlitz Gottes. Bush selbst wählte die Worte, sie sind nicht mehr bei uns, aber sie sind jetzt zu Hause. Also Sie sehen, Frank, man hat da keine Scheu vor einer religiös gefärbten Sprache. Und heute Morgen beim Kirchgang, da sehen wir die Bilder, als Bush mit seiner Familie rauskommt, da betete Bush für die Opfer und für die Familien. Es ist traditionell ein Moment der Sammlung für Amerika, wenn solche Katastrophen passieren, und man erwartet vom Präsidenten, dass er diese Sammlung und dieses Innehalten verkörpert.
Gibt es schon einen Terminplan für die Trauerfeierlichkeiten?
Nein, den gibt es nicht. Es gab vor einigen Minuten eine Meldung der NASA, dass eine Entscheidung darüber wahrscheinlich noch heute zu erwarten ist. Es wurde darin gesagt, dass die Trauerfeier bald stattfinden solle und dass sie wahrscheinlich in Houston stattfinde. Details werden noch bekannt gegeben, aber man hört, dass die Angehörigen, die ja in Cape Canaveral in Florida auf die Astronauten gewartet hatten, dass die nach Houston gebracht werden.
Der Mittwoch soll ein wichtiger Tag sein in der Irak-Krise. Werden die Ereignisse um die Columbia Einfluss haben auf die Irak-Politik von Bush?
Ja, Frank, um das einzubetten, um die Antwort einzubetten, ein bisschen in Psychologie, in der sich Amerika jetzt befindet, muss man wissen, dass solche Katastrophen in Amerika mit einer würdevollen Sammlung eigentlich beantwortet werden. Man spürt in solchen Momenten etwas von dem Zusammengehörigkeitsgefühl, das dieses Land verbindet. Und die Amerikaner scheuen sich dann auch nicht, Gefühle zu zeigen. Die Zeitungen ziehen heute Parallelen mit dem Schock vom 11. September 2001, dem Tag der großen Terroranschläge. Aber nicht im Sinne eines Trotzes, sondern im Sinne eines Schocks und im Sinne des Gefühls der Verwundbarkeit und der Endlichkeit des menschlichen Daseins. Insofern wäre jeder Politiker schlecht beraten, der das instrumentalisieren will. Wenn man eine Schlussfolgerung daraus ziehen kann, dann dass diese Sache die Amerikaner psychologisch und seelisch etwas erschöpft. Es ist also nicht eine Haltung, in der man jetzt die Kriegstrommel noch lauter drehen könnte.
Tomboro, vielen Dank für diese Einschätzung nach Washington. Die NASA hat die Space Shuttle-Flüge vorerst gestoppt. Das bedeutet, dass die 3 Astronauten in der internationalen Raumstation auf die Versorgung durch die Russen angewiesen sind. Eine dieser Versorgungsraketen ist heute Nachmittag planmäßig gestartet. Erleichterung bei den Russen, nachdem sie die Unglücksnachricht aus Amerika geschockt hatte.
Die Columbia-Tragödie, sie ist auch in den russischen Nachrichtensendungen das beherrschende Thema. Die Astronauten haben bei der Eroberung des Alls im Namen des Friedens, der Wissenschaft und des Fortschritts ihr Leben gegeben, sagte der russische Präsident Wladimir Putin, der noch gestern Nacht mit George Bush und Ariel Sharon telefoniert hatte. Überall in den russischen Raumfahrtzentren heute Krisensitzungen und Betroffenheit bei den Kollegen der Amerikaner. Wir Kosmonauten und Astronauten sind wie eine Familie. Wir kennen uns gut, beraten uns gegenseitig, wir haben viele Gemeinsamkeiten und darum glaube ich, dass das auch für meine Kollegen eine persönliche Tragödie ist. Heute Nachmittag dann in Baikonur der planmäßige Start einer unbemannten russischen Progressraumfähre, um Vorräte für die dreiköpfige Besatzung zu bringen. Versorgungsengpässe gäbe es keine, so heißt es, aber die vermutlich auf lange Zeit eingestellten Shuttleflüge der Amerikaner werde Russland kaum mit eigenen Kräften ausgleichen können. Der ganze Ausbau der ISS hing natürlich von den Bauelementen ab, die die US-Shuttles hochbringen konnten. Und diese Elemente können so groß sein, dass sie nicht in unsere Progresstransporter passen. Und daher muss der Zeitplan für den Ausbau der Station stark korrigiert werden. Das entscheidende Problem, Russlands Raumfahrtindustrie ist hoch verschuldet, kann selbst die fest vereinbarten Soyuz-Raketen nur mit Mühe fristgerecht fertigstellen. Selbst wenn die Amerikaner Moskau also eine wichtigere Rolle beim Aufbau der Raumstation zugestehen würden, das würde dauern. Für ein funktionierendes Raumfahrtprogramm muss einfach frühzeitig genügend Geld investiert werden und dieses Geld muss dann auch regelmäßig weiterfließen. Die amerikanische Botschaft in Moskau heute Nachmittag. Auch die Menschen auf der Straße empfinden den Absturz des amerikanischen Shuttles als eine gemeinsame Tragödie beider Länder.
Der erste Westdeutsche im Weltall war 1983 Ulf Merbold. Er flog damals mit der gestern verunglückten Columbia. Herr Merbold, kann man es nach diesen zwei Katastrophen eigentlich noch verantworten, Menschen mit diesem System auf den Weg zu bringen?
Das ist natürlich im Moment schwierig zu beantworten. Auf jeden Fall wird die NASA erst die Ursachen für dieses katastrophale Ereignis aufzuklären haben. Aber es ist klar, die Raumfahrt ist ohne Risiko nicht zu haben, aber das gilt für viele Dinge, auch insbesondere für diejenigen, die uns helfen, der Gesellschaft helfen, die Erfahrungshorizonte zu verschieben. Man muss immer abwägen, was gewinne ich hinzu und welches Risiko kostet es mich?
Wenn man nochmal zurückgeht in die Situation in der Kapsel, das war in einem kritischen Moment beim Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre. Wenn dort Computersysteme oder Hydrauliksysteme ausgefallen sind, hatten da die Astronauten noch die Gelegenheit, von Hand einzugreifen? Gibt es diese Möglichkeit überhaupt?
Also so wie ich es aus dem Fernsehen entnommen habe, ist ja die Columbia in 60 Kilometer bei Mach 16 oder 17 einfach auseinandergebrochen. An dieser Stelle, da gibt es keine Hoffnung, dass man da noch irgendwas retten könnte.
Sie sind Manager heute in der europäischen Raumfahrt, kümmern sich auch um die internationale Raumstation. Was bedeutet dieses neue Unglück für die Zukunft dieser Raumstation?
Wissen Sie, jetzt sind vielleicht gerade 25 Stunden ins Land gegangen. Es mag ja sein, dass in Texas oder in Louisiana noch die Leichenteile unserer Freunde liegen. Also da kann ich im Moment nichts dazu sagen.
Wenn man an die Challenger-Katastrophe denkt, damals hat es 3 Jahre gedauert, bis wieder die ersten Flüge losgingen. Muss man auch mit einer so langen Atempause jetzt rechnen?
Ich sagte Ihnen ja eben, im Moment sind wir damit voll beschäftigt, den Gedanken bei unseren Kollegen, bei ihren Familien. Also ich kann nur sagen, es wird sicherlich weitergehen. Denn andernfalls wäre ja das Opfer, das wir hier beklagen, umsonst erbracht. Wann und wie, muss man abwarten, muss man mal schauen, was die Experten der NASA als Ursache ermitteln. Aber weitergehen wird es.
Dankeschön, Ulf Merbold, für Ihre Einschätzung an diesem Tag. Dankeschön. Bitte sehr. Ilan Ramon, der erste israelische Astronaut, er galt in seiner Heimat als Held. Überall in Israel wird um ihn getrauert. So auch in einer Schule in der Nähe von Haifa. Für die Kinder dort hatte er ein Experiment im Weltraum gemacht.
Überall in Israel hängen heute die Fahnen auf Halbmast, auch vor dem Gymnasium in Kiryat Motzkin nördlich von Haifa. Eine Gruppe von 32 Schülern hier hatte 3 Jahre am Konzept eines Experiments gearbeitet. Ihres war ausgewählt worden und schon am ersten Tag nach dem Start führte Ilan Ramon es im Shuttle aus. Die Physiklehrerin erläutert, es habe sich um die Auswirkung der Schwerelosigkeit auf Wachstum und Verbreitung verschiedener Stoffe, wie zum Beispiel Kobalt, gehandelt. Vor 2 Jahren hat der Astronaut deshalb die Schule besucht. Wir waren sehr stolz auf das Projekt, haben lange daran gearbeitet und auf einen Erfolg gehofft. Ich habe eine richtige Gänsehaut und glaube, ich habe das Unglück noch gar nicht richtig verstanden. Ich denke, das wird noch eine Woche dauern. Und er meint, vielleicht ist es doch ein kleiner Trost, dass Ilan seinen Traum verwirklichen konnte, in den Weltraum zu fliegen. Die Physiklehrerin hat mit den Schülern all die gemeinsamen Empfindungen zu sammeln versucht. Desaster, Schock und Trauer, Stolz und Angst. Mit psychologischer Hilfe soll das Drama aufgearbeitet werden. Einige aus dieser 11. Klasse sind sogar beim Start in Cape Canaveral dabei gewesen. Sie haben E-Mails ausgetauscht mit Ilan Ramon im Shuttle und nach seiner Rückkehr auf die Ergebnisse des Experiments gehofft. Jetzt bleibt ihnen nur die Erinnerung.
Wir haben es gehört, es wird noch lange dauern, bis wir genau wissen, was die Columbia am Himmel über Texas hat zerbrechen lassen. Vielen Dank für Ihr Interesse an diesem Brennpunkt. Auf Wiedersehen.
Es lag auf einem Feld irgendwo mitten in Texas. Es sah futuristisch aus, da hatte er es einfach mitgenommen auf dem Truck bis nach Hause. So etwas sehen die NASA-Spezialisten überhaupt nicht gerne. Bleiben Sie weg von den Trümmerteilen, haben sie gewarnt. Überall in Texas, Louisiana und anderswo sind sie vom Himmel gefallen. Die Columbia zerlegt in Abertausende Einzelteile. Es gab einen Knall, sagt dieses kleine Mädchen, etwas kam näher und näher, dann gab es eine Explosion. Jessicas Familie hatte Glück im Unglück. Auf dem Boden keine Verletzten, doch das ist auch schon die einzig versöhnliche Nachricht. Alle 7 Besatzungsmitglieder der Columbia sind tot. Das Abzeichen von Oberst Rick Douglas Husband, nur 45 Jahre alt, ist der Vater von 2 Kindern geworden. Es war sein zweiter Ausflug ins All. Sekundenbruchteile vor der Katastrophe meldet sich Husband noch einmal bei der Bodenstation. Der letzte Kontakt. Er bestätigt einen Funkspruch mit dem Wort Roger. Dann krächzt ein Stöhnen aus dem Lautsprecher. Das Shuttle ist verloren. Die NASA ratlos. Warum?
Nach den Informationen von heute Nacht zeichnen sich die Ursachen ziemlich deutlich ab. Man weiß, dass beim Start ein Isolierstück, ein Stück Schaum vom äußeren Tank abgefallen ist und durch die enorme Beschleunigung der Luft auf die Vorderkante des linken Flügels gekracht ist und dabei Hitzekacheln abgelöst hat.
Die Theorie: Beim Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre versagt das Hitzeschild, die Steuerungshydraulik setzt aus, der Shuttle wird manövrierunfähig und zerbricht. Vor dem Kennedy Space Center in Houston, Texas, wehen die Fahnen auf Halbmast, Trauer, stille Gebete, Tränen. Alle Amerikaner sind in Gedanken bei den Familien dieser Männer und Frauen, sagt US-Präsident Bush, die diesen Schock und diese Trauer aushalten müssen. Tiefe Bestürzung auch in Israel. Unser tiefes Mitgefühl gilt den Angehörigen, sagt Premier Sharon. Dann erinnert er noch einmal an Luftwaffenoberst Ilan Ramon, den ersten Israeli im All. Auch er starb bei dem Absturz. Ich bin sicher, dass die Erinnerung an Ilan Ramon, den israelischen Raumfahrtpionier, in unseren Herzen weiterleben wird.
Ich habe dem amerikanischen Präsidenten, ich habe dem israelischen Premierminister mein Beileid ausgedrückt und gebeten, das auch den Angehörigen zu übermitteln. Ich denke, dass man wirklich sagen kann und muss, dass viele Menschen in Deutschland mit den Opfern, mit ihren Angehörigen trauern. Und das geht sicher uns allen auch so.
Neben der Trauer bleiben jetzt die offenen Fragen. Und solange die nicht beantwortet sind, wird die NASA aller Voraussicht nach keine Raumfähren mehr ins All schicken.
Und in Atlanta begrüße ich jetzt unsere USA-Korrespondentin Verena von Bassewitz. Was gibt es heute am Tag danach für neue Erkenntnisse in Cape Canaveral?
Auf einer Pressekonferenz hat heute Sean O'Keefe gesagt, das ist einer der Direktoren und Verantwortlichen der NASA, dass eine unabhängige Kommission die Unfallursache der Columbus untersuchen wird. Zum Zweiten wollte er sich auch nicht festlegen, wann es wieder Flüge der NASA ins All geben wird. Und dann berichtete er, dass die Angehörigen alle bei der NASA sich gemeldet haben, gesagt haben, die Mission muss weitergehen, sie darf nicht unterbrochen werden. Das müssen wir alleine schon im Angedenken an unsere Angehörigen machen. Zum anderen ist es so, dass auch die Angehörigen der Challenger gesagt haben, es muss weitergehen, denn da gab es vor einer Woche einen Gedenkgottesdienst, denn am 28. Januar 1986 war ja die Challenger verunglückt. Und zudem ist dann heute auch noch ein Versorgungsraumschiff, denn das dürfen wir nicht vergessen, zur ISS hochgeflogen, denn da sind ja noch 3 Astronauten oben. Das ist das Neueste aus dieser Ecke.
Es ist ja heute der Tag danach, nach dem Unglück. Wie wird das Ganze in Amerika kommentiert?
Die Kommentare sind noch sehr dominiert von der Trauer, denn ich meine, der Schock ist groß. Und auf allen Tageszeitungen ist das auch die Titelgeschichte, so wie hier bei der New York Times. Zudem ist ja das ganze Land bis Mittwoch auf Halbmast geflaggt und in allen Gottesdiensten wird es heute Gedenkminuten geben.
Vielen Dank aus Amerika, Verena von Bassewitz. Die Ursachenforschung für das Columbia-Unglück läuft weiter. Unterdessen diskutieren Fachleute über den gesamten Verlauf der Columbia-Mission. Der deutsche Astronaut Ulrich Walter ist promovierter Physiker und war 1993 als Nutzlastexperte mit der D2-Shuttle-Mission im Orbit. Nach seiner Ansicht begann die Katastrophe bereits beim Start. Hier nun seine Einschätzungen zum gesamten Flug der Columbia vom 16. Januar an bis zu ihrem tragischen Absturz.
Der Grund begann bereits beim Start. Beim Start steht der Shuttle senkrecht und zwar ist es angebracht an einem großen externen Tank. In diesem externen Tank befindet sich der Treibstoff für die Antriebe hier unten. Dieser Treibstoff ist sehr kalt, etwa minus 250 Grad Celsius und muss deswegen isoliert werden. Diese Isolierung ist dieses rostrote Zeug, was man sehen kann. Es ist eine Art Schaum. Und Teile dieses Schaums sind jetzt beim Start am 16. Januar abgebrochen und sind dann durch diesen hohen Luftwiderstand und diese hohe Geschwindigkeit heruntergeschossen am Shuttle entlang. Und hier stehen nun verschiedene Teile seitlich vom Shuttle ab. Dieses Teil ist mit großer Wahrscheinlichkeit jetzt hier auf den Flügel geschlagen und hat in diesem Bereich Hitzekacheln abgeschlagen. Die NASA hat bereits beim Start gesehen, dass da was vorgefallen war. Aber die Techniker haben nach der Untersuchung gesagt, nein, es liegt kein Problem bei der Landung vor. Nun hat es sich kurz vor der Landung herausgestellt, dass hier im hinteren Bereich in der Höhe der Querklappen gewisse Temperatursensoren ausgefallen sind. Das alleine wäre noch kein Grund zur Beunruhigung gewesen, denn die vergangenen Jahre haben gezeigt, dass immer wieder Temperatursensoren ausgefallen sind. Aber dazu kam, dass der Druck der Räder hier unten abgefallen war. Und das war ein Hinweis darauf, dass wirklich was nicht in Ordnung war. Und drittens, der dritte Hinweis kurz vor der Landung war, dass die Hydraulik für diese Querklappen ausgefallen war. Und danach ist meiner Meinung nach der Shuttle nicht mehr richtig manövrierfähig. Und das, denke ich, hat dazu geführt, dass dann in der größten Hitze in etwa 60 Kilometer Höhe der Shuttle nicht mehr richtig lenkbar war. Es hat sich, wie ich glaube, aber das muss jetzt nicht der Fall sein, quergestellt. Damit hat es sich sozusagen die weiche Flanke dieser Hitze preisgegeben und damit ist es dann auch zerbrochen. Die Information direkt nach dem Start war ja, und das wussten auch die Astronauten, dass beim Start diese Teilchen heruntergefallen war und auf den Flügel. In dem Augenblick kann die Crew nicht viel machen, denn sie hat keine Sicht vom vorderen Teil des Shuttles auf die Flügel. Das heißt, sie kann selber nicht beurteilen, wie groß der Schaden ist. Das konnten allein News nur machen, denn die hatten das Filmmaterial während des Aufstiegs, wird der Shuttle durch verschiedene Kameras beobachtet und die Auswertung dieses Filmmaterials hat eben die NASA zum Schluss kommen lassen, dass die Gefahr eigentlich vernachlässigbar ist. Aber ich denke, das war ein Fehler. Die Möglichkeit, die noch bestanden hätte, wäre, dass die NASA angeordnet hätte, während der Mission einen Raumspaziergang zu machen. Sie hätten einen Raumausstieg machen können. Hier gibt es einen Ausstieg für die Astronauten. Hier können sie heraus. Sie wären dann um das Shuttle herumgeschwebt und hätten sich die seitlichen Teile und die Flügel anschauen können. Die Astronauten vom Flugdeck selbst haben bei geöffneten Ladebuchtluken keinen Einblick auf diese Stellen. Das heißt, die Astronauten selber konnten nicht beurteilen, wie groß der Schaden war. Nur ein Raumspaziergang hätte da also Sicherheit schaffen können. Die NASA hat entschieden, das nicht zu machen. Sie hat es also dabei belassen. Natürlich ist es jetzt so, dass sich die NASA Gedanken darüber macht, was jetzt mit den Shuttle passiert. Sie hat angekündigt, dass für die nächste Mission die Vorbereitungen erstmal normal weiterlaufen, aber das heißt überhaupt nichts. Mit großer Sicherheit wird kein Shuttle mehr innerhalb der nächsten Monate starten, bevor nicht der wirkliche Grund gefunden ist. Ich vermute mal, dass innerhalb eines Monats der Grund gefunden ist, aber auch dann hat man ja noch keine Lösung. Es bleibt immer ein unangenehmes Gefühl im Magen, vor allen Dingen, wenn man nicht weiß, was wirklich jetzt dort wirklich war. Denn die Astronauten wussten es nicht und auch die NASA wusste es nicht wirklich. Sie hat ja nur die Filmaufnahmen untersucht. Das heißt, man hat ein ungutes Gefühl. Aber das allein ist noch kein Problem. Erst als beim Wiedereintritt dann der Computer gemeldet hat per Alert, lieber Commander, Thermoelemente sind ausgefallen, Thermosensoren, dann ist sicherlich der Commander unruhig geworden. Er hat es mit Sicherheit über den sogenannten Air-to-Ground mit NASA Control in Houston abgesprochen. Das allein ist allerdings auch noch kein Problem. Wie gesagt, diese Thermosensoren fallen ab und zu schon mal aus. Aber als dann die Nachricht kam, der Luftdruck in den Reifen ist abgesagt und die Hydraulik, der Hydraulikdruck ist weg, dann war wirklich der Alarm da. Aber man weiß, dass wenige Sekunden später dann der Funkverkehr abbrach. Das heißt, es gab keine Möglichkeit mehr des Nachrichtenaustauschs. Und mit dem Abbruch des Funksignals ist natürlich auch der Datenstrom vom Shuttle hinunter auf den Boden abgebrochen. Das heißt, die NASA hatte dann keinerlei Zugang mehr zu den Shuttle-Daten. Und das ist natürlich besonders tragisch. Das heißt, sie konnte dann nichts mehr machen, sie wusste dann nicht mehr, wie es weitergeht. Es kann jetzt allerdings sein, dass die NASA gezwungen ist, aufgrund dieser Situation ganz andere Lösungen von Hitzekacheln zu suchen. Wenn das der Fall wäre, könnte es Jahre brauchen, bis der Shuttle wieder startet.
Soweit die Einschätzungen unseres Spezialisten. Nur einen Tag nach dem Absturz der US-Raumfähre Columbia hat Russland eine unbemannte Versorgungskapsel zur internationalen Weltraumstation ISS geschickt. Die Progress M47 wurde um 13:59 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit vom kasachischen Raumfahrtzentrum Baikonur aus von einer Sojus-U-Rakete ins All getragen. Sie soll der dreiköpfigen ISS-Besatzung Treibstoff, Nahrungsmittel und Geräte bringen. Nach Angaben des russischen Kontrollzentrums erreichte die Versorgungskapsel planmäßig die Erdumlaufbahn. Sie soll am Dienstag an die ISS andocken. Der Start war bereits seit langem geplant gewesen und stand nicht im Zusammenhang mit dem Absturz der Columbia. Soweit die Informationen über die Shuttle-Katastrophe in den USA. Wir halten Sie natürlich auf dem Laufenden.
Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
I heard the explosions. We came out here and we stood here for a minute or so, it seemed like, and then the piece of the fuselage is laying over there, apparently the fuselage, impacted the ground, sounded like a shotgun going off.
This day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
We're a bit numb right now. It's sort of unbelievable. But life goes on for all of us.
My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched, we'll find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on.
Welcome to a special late edition. I'm Wolf Blitzer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. NASA, the nation, and indeed the world are mourning the loss of 7 Columbia astronauts. And the search now begins seriously for answers to the questions: what happened, why this tragedy began, and why the tragedy claimed their lives.
And I'm Darren Kagan. I'm at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Columbia was supposed to land here at 15 minutes before it was supposed to land. It exploded in midair. The question now from here and across the space program, where does the U.S. space program and NASA go from here?
I'm Miles O'Brien, also at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. NASA's best and brightest, the no-kidding rocket scientists are meeting as we speak, getting their first look at the initial data which came down from Columbia just before it disintegrated. Their focus on that left wing. Why did it fail, and could the crew have been doomed almost from the start?
CNN's Anderson Cooper is standing by with the latest developments in all of this. But before we go to Anderson Cooper, I want to go to David Mattingly. He's in Nacogdoches, Texas. That's where a lot of the debris has fallen from the skies over the past 24 hours plus, and that's where the investigation is focusing on what that debris might tell all of us as to the cause of the Columbia disaster. David?
Hello, Wolf. There are search teams out in the field right now with global positioning devices. They're out there mapping the massive debris field that cuts a diagonal across this county. And the authorities here are finding they have a lot more debris in this county than they originally thought last night. They have identified 800 separate areas where debris has fallen here. Some of those locations might have a single piece of debris on it. Others, however, might have hundreds of pieces of debris. And it's so important right now that all these areas and pieces are accurately mapped by satellite, because NASA needs to know what pieces of the shuttle fell and where. The debris pattern, according to County Sheriff here, can tell NASA a lot about how the shuttle came apart. But there's one big problem that they're having to deal with right now, and that's manpower. They don't have enough people here to stand guard over all of the locations. So NASA has given them some guidance on what they consider most important.
We realize we cannot muster enough manpower to possibly post someone at every debris location that's already been reported, let alone the additional sites that will continue to come in throughout the day. Therefore, we're going to begin an analysis of how important each site is in terms of us posting a representative there, and we will basically make an assessment on whether or not we will man that site.
There have been 4 reports of human remains found in this county, those reports being turned over to the FBI for verification. The FBI also looking into some possible cases of trophy hunting by people here in the county. Warnings continue to go out today to people that if you see something on the ground, don't pick it up, don't take it anywhere, don't even touch it, because it could be illegal, first of all. Also, it could have some toxic material on it. Some people not getting that message soon enough yesterday. 70 people going to the hospital here in this county. All of those 70 people, however, fortunately, were not having any symptoms and were all sent home in good health. Now, there's one problem that they're having right now is the remote areas. I want to show you past the flags here that are at half staff here. You can see the wooded area back there. This part of East Texas, there's a national forest. There's a lot of woods that they're having to deal with, and authorities are already conceding that it could be years from now that people are still walking through the woods and finding pieces of this shuttle. Wolf.
And the mood in Nacogdoches, David, among the people as they see this debris that's fallen on the ground there, what are the people saying generally?
Here at the command center, the mood is a sense of determination. They know they have a tremendous job ahead of them. They know they don't have the manpower to do it properly right now, but they're doing the best they can, and they know it's a very important thing that they get out there and map this debris field as accurately as possible for NASA.
David Mattingly in Nacogdoches, Texas. David, thanks very much. Darren Kagan standing by at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That's where the shuttle was supposed to have landed. It obviously did not. What's happening there today, Darren?
A very different day than they planned here, Wolf. When we arrived here early this morning, they said that that would have been the time when the astronauts would have finished their celebration and heading toward where you are in Houston. Instead, things are eerily quiet here today at Kennedy Space Center. I want to take the story from what David Mattingly was talking about. Where does all that debris go from here, and where does the investigation go? The command center is going to be at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, and that's where we find our Mike Brooks standing by for that. Mike, hello.
Hi, Darren. How are you? We're here at Barksdale. They're waiting.
Go ahead.
Here at Barksdale, Darren, they're awaiting evidence. Once it's recovered, they will bring it here. One of the reasons they're going to use Barksdale Air Force Base are because of the large hangar spaces here, because it is a B-52 bomber base. Similar to the hangars you see in some of the vintage aircraft you see there on display here. Behind that, you will see some of the hangars that will be used once the evidence is recovered and brought here. Now, as Darren said, NASA's command post is here. NASA is the lead agency for the investigation and for the debris recovery. But as David said, there are other agencies involved. The Federal Emergency Management Agency is overseeing the recovery efforts out in the field. They are searching for and securing the evidence until the NASA can get there and assist them. Now, I spoke with someone from NASA a little while ago. He said that they're used to dealing with systems of the shuttle, but the evidence is not their forte. He said, in fact, evidence recovery is kind of foreign to us. So that's why we're seeing the deployment of other agencies, such as the FBI, ATF, NTSB, to assist NASA in recovering efforts, since they do it for a living. Darren?
A couple questions for you, Mike. First of all, I'm kind of wondering how this is all going to work. I think of all these thousands and thousands of pieces coming to Barksdale and laying out in this hangar, as you describe. It just sounds like a giant jigsaw puzzle to me. Where do they go from there?
Well, it is kind of a giant jigsaw puzzle, Darren. And once they get all the evidence and bring it here, they will sit down. Engineers from NASA will sift through this. Metallurgists, specialists from NASA will go through looking for any piece that could have played a role in the tragedy of Columbia. It's very similar to, for instance, the TWA 800 crash back in 1996. I was an investigator on that, was working in the hangar, trying to piece together some of the pieces as it was brought in from the debris fields off the coast of Long Island. They're going to be doing the same thing here for the Shuttle Columbia. They're in no hurry. They can sit down, take a look at every piece, and find out if there is something, you know, the kind of the oh wow piece that maybe contributed to this awful tragedy. Darren?
I know you also have experience with the situation when different agencies deal with each other. You already told us that NASA will be the lead agency, but you know when you get different groups together, there can be power struggles, and everyone doesn't always play nicely.
Well, not all the time, but right now, Tom Ridge, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, has put FEMA in charge of the recovery of the evidence right now, of the debris. So I think that they're working together a lot better than they used to, and I think that Tom Ridge and his folks at the Department of Homeland Security will make sure that that happens. They have that mandate, and they will carry that out. Darren?
Well, let's certainly hope so. A lot of people are going to want a lot of answers about what happened yesterday. Mike Brooks at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. Mike, thank you very much. We toss it now back to Houston and Miles.
Thanks very much, Darren. While you were talking, the folks at NASA came in and told us there's a 3.5-hour delay in that briefing we've been telling you about. It now will be at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, a briefing from some of the key members of the shuttle management team to give us a sense of where they stand right now after a solid overnight pouring over of data that was captured immediately following the disintegration of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We will, of course, bring that briefing to you live whenever it happens. As it stands right now, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Yesterday, when the Space Shuttle disintegrated at a little after 9 o'clock Eastern Time, the president was at Camp David. He made his way to the White House fairly quickly and addressed the nation with some rather touching words, an attempt to provide some solace at a very dark time. Now, as we look ahead, we look toward the possibility of some memorial services later this week. One here, perhaps, one perhaps in Washington. CNN's Suzanne Malveaux is at the White House with more on all of that.
Good morning. President Bush and the First Lady attended church services this morning. The White House emphasizing this is a time for mourning, reflection, as well as prayer. The flag here at the White House at half-staff, as so many places around the world. Also, we are told the president has been receiving condolences from leaders across the globe. Now, as you know, President Bush, when he addressed the nation, vowing that despite the grounding of the shuttle, that the space program would continue. There is already a heated debate that is taking place both for people who are in and outside of NASA, some complaints about budget cuts as well as lack of funding, some claiming that it has compromised the safety of the Space Shuttle program. Well, as you know, tomorrow President Bush is going to be introducing the 2004 budget. We are told for NASA, 2003 was $15.1 billion. Sources tell us do not expect much more than that. It's pretty much going to be the same. But as we know, your guest, Director of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, to answer many of those questions coming up.
Suzanne Malveaux at the White House. Suzanne, thanks very much for that report. Sean O'Keefe is the NASA administrator. He's joining us now live from Washington. Mr. O'Keefe, thanks very much for joining us. Is the investigation focusing primarily on those tiles that may have been damaged, and that's a big may have been damaged on liftoff?
Well, there's no question. The investigation and all the evidence we're collecting is in pursuit of that theory and every other possible theory that could be out there. We're going to collect the evidence, let the evidence speak for it, let the facts speak for themselves. And as we come to conclusion on what the cause of this accident was, we're not ruling anything out at this juncture. So I think Darren's commentary is exactly right. Secretary Ridge has been fantastic at making sure that all of the state and local law enforcement officials, the FEMA, emergency services folks, everybody is securing the evidence, and we're going to pore over that and make sure that any theory is not ruled out. We're starting with the opportunity to look at every single possibility of what could have gone wrong.
And just to button this up, because I know there are going to be lingering questions no matter what you say, the notion of foul play or terrorism, has that now been ruled out?
Well, again, what I said yesterday still applies today, which is it does not appear as though there was any prospect this could have been something perpetrated from the ground. I mean, again, the loss of communication occurred shortly around 9 a.m. Eastern time at about 207,000 feet as the orbiter was traveling at Mach 18. So the likelihood of anything that could have been perpetuated from the ground is extremely low, if not non-existent. So we're not ruling anything out, though. We're looking through this, and as a matter of fact, by having Hal Gaiman, Admiral Gaiman, who was the lead on the Cole investigation, he is leading this particular independent investigation board for us. And so even that possibility is going to be examined, but I think the probability is very low that it could have occurred from the ground at all. But again, we're leaving nothing to chance. Admiral Gaiman's background and his chairmanship of this board will settle any and all possible circumstance of what caused this accident.
Mr. O'Keefe, as you well remember, after the Challenger disaster in 1986, then-President Reagan appointed a special presidential commission chaired by the then former Secretary of State William Rogers to look into what happened. Do you think that would be appropriate, that kind of presidential commission this time?
Well, at this juncture, we've got the internal investigation that's underway, and again, I think as you all have covered very, very thoroughly, and I appreciate that, all the effort going on to coordinate among all the federal agencies is working as seamlessly as we know how to do it. Having an independent objective board led by someone of the stature and standing of a four-star retired Admiral Hal Gaiman, to conduct this with members who are external NASA experts looking at safety, mission assurance, and flight certification is our goal. That's part of our plan. That's what's been announced. Our Deputy Administrator, Fred Gregory, is traveling with them right now down to Shreveport, Louisiana, to assure that Admiral Gaiman and his investigative board has all the support they need in order to come to conclusion on what caused this horrific accident.
The next space shuttle had been scheduled for March 1st. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Do you have any idea how long a hold on new space shuttle takeoffs will continue?
Sure. As we do in every situation, anytime there's any compromise of safety of flight, we always suspend operations. That's certainly true in this case. And as soon as we get determination from Admiral Gaiman's investigative board on what may have caused this accident, we're not putting a timeline on that. We're going to let the facts speak and let the evidence speak for what caused this. We will then make a determination of what we need to do to correct it and only fly safely to resume safety of flight operations. Meanwhile, we've got folks aboard the International Space Station, three astronauts and cosmonauts, Ken Bowersox, Don Pettit, and Mikla Bodarin, who are depending upon us to make sure that we run this to ground diligently, we support them in every way possible, and get back to flying as soon as we can in order to assure that they are brought back home and a replacement crew is sent up to relieve them. And that's exactly what we're committed to doing.
Sean O'Keefe, the NASA administrator. Mr. O'Keefe, thanks so much for joining us. Our deepest condolences to you as well and to the entire NASA community. You're looking at live pictures from Nacogdoches, Texas. They're having a news conference, the local law enforcement, on the debris that's been found throughout that area.
We're using a priority basis on any site that has a report of possible remains. Obviously, we're going to take as a top priority any site that has a report of anything that may be volatile or harmful in nature, you know, radioactive, chemical-oriented, is a top priority. Beyond that, any site that appears that it may have some type of data circuitry or something where data can be retrieved from it is also considered a top priority. Then we're operating on the theory of large accumulated pieces. But some of our process is also governed by where each piece of debris is located. If the debris is in a very remote location and it's unlikely that it's going to be encountered by a significant number of citizens, we may not man that site over a site that's in a more populated area and possibly has public exposure. No, we had hoped to receive information by now on a possible plan when NASA may begin a recovery effort on the debris. Unfortunately, that information has not been delivered to us yet. We do anticipate a crew from the federal government, including a NASA representative, to meet with us shortly, and we should hopefully learn more about that by the next briefing point. Well, again, and I can't reiterate enough that we have a mass amount of forest and timberland within our county. Some of this area may not receive coverage for weeks or months, but we will begin to try to search the areas based on the path that has been charted, and we're going to try to use helicopters that have been volunteered to assist us with a flyover to see if we can't more specifically pinpoint those debris fields or the areas that we think debris fields may exist in before we put our mounted units out there. The largest piece so far that we have received a report of is approximately 7 to 8 feet in length. We're over 1,000 sites still on reporting, and I'm not trying to keep a running number on 1,002 versus 1,015, but in general terms, as we increase from that, we'll probably give those to you in increments of 100 or so. Obviously, a number of those sites, and Chief, I'll let you, if you want to address that more specifically, talk about what sites are inside the city.
Well, of course, probably half those sites were reported within the city, and I think the reason for that is obviously population density. We have more people out there that are finding these items, and okay, I'm sorry. Let me start over again. I think the reason we found so many sites in the city, obviously, is because of the population density. We have more people reporting these sites, and we're getting this information to the command post so that they can be looked at later on by the federal government. So, but the calls are coming in constantly. Communications, like the sheriff said, has been overwhelmed for the past couple of days, and they're doing a terrific job. The last official, what I got last night was about 528, and that's in this. We had sightings all through the night. Of course, it slowed down considerably, but it never stopped. Yes, sir.
Some debris has been picked up, and the National Guard left the location. Where has that debris gone?
Well, the only item that was of significance was a fuel cell that landed at the airport, and it was moved into a hangar, and it has been since tested by the United States Army. Oh, a tremendous amount of pieces, yes. Yes, that's correct.
And that stuff's all being moved where?
No, that hasn't been moved. It's still on site. We haven't moved anything.
There are places in town that were guarded yesterday, all day yesterday. And
Right. No, they're still being guarded as far as I'm concerned.
I know of at least 3 places.
Uh-huh.
Chief,
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
There have been a few undisclosed site locations where federal authorities were sent to those sites, and based on the description of the components that were at those sites, they did go ahead and make a decision to retrieve that after it was cataloged. At this time, we're not in a position to be able to tell you where that was taken to, but it has been recovered for NASA. Primarily, that's going to deal with data circuitry information, other than, of course, remains.
Do we have any other questions? Sure.
Based on that map and what you found where people are, and what you know about the wide area you got in the county where people aren't, how much is out there? I mean, obviously, the shuttle didn't just fall on the roadside.
Right.
Well, fortunately, the citizens of Nacogdoches County elected me as sheriff because of my law enforcement skills, not my mathematical or physics research abilities. I will estimate that there's a number of pieces out there yet to be determined. Probably just based on the number that we're seeing, it won't surprise me if that number doubles, maybe even more than that. I don't know that we'll ever find all these pieces, but to really give you a more educated guess than that, that's beyond what I'm prepared to do.
How big is the search field gotten? Since you said you've gotten additional calls this morning, and yesterday you were saying 500 square miles. Has it increased it, or?
The basic search field is not really increased. As you could see from the map, our pattern still runs in a more or less east to westerly direction across our county. What you will see happen as this search continues is we will broaden that path in a north to south type direction with our search efforts. But, you know, we can't extend the borders of our county east to west anymore, and we are literally spread from one county line to the other in that direction.
On your map, how wide is that band now?
I would say that we're probably dealing with about a 12 to 15 mile wide radius there. No, again, I'm sure the federal agency is still trying to get their plan in place, and hopefully we will get an answer. We hope to have that this morning. We did not get it. Hopefully by this afternoon we'll receive, further guidance on that.
There's a wonderful World War II movie called The Longest Day, and what they were told in that was hold until relieved. Hold until relieved. And that's what we intend to do. And we are trying to use our resources as widely as we can to accomplish that. We have been told that hopefully we will have some information through FEMA around noon. So we have called another command meeting at noon. Therefore, we will have another press conference at 1 o'clock. And hopefully by 1 o'clock we can give you some more definitive information. We are also trying to feed off of your questions. As you ask us for information, we're trying to gather that and give that back to you, and we appreciate that very much, to try to get the information that you feel like your listeners need to have or that you need to have to do your job. We thank you for your help. It is amazing to me how much you truly understand about this kind of incident and recognize that we are trying to coordinate multi-agencies, multi-talented people, and do that in a very efficient way and continue to give you information. And we will proceed to do that throughout the day. One last one. There's always one last one.
You must be aware of the reports of debris falling in other communities.
Yes, sir.
Are you under the general impression that most of it is
Well, my general impression is I think that we have such a coordinated effort between the county and the city that we are gathering information faster than what's happening in our more rural counties that don't have the same resources.
along that trajectory from Dallas to Shreveport?
Yes.
Debris has fallen in a wide variety of places.
Yes, sir.
But it appears that most has fallen here. That's a question. Has fallen here.
Again, sir, I'm having a hard time answering your question because we're just operating on known information, and we're not sure if the other counties are gathering this information as quickly as we are. So it does have the appearance because we've got good communication and support going on here.
Let me also address that. of the rural counties that surround us, Nacogdoches County is one of the more populated counties. Some of the counties to the east and south of us don't have quite the population that we do, and they are more remote. So even though it appears that we have received the bulk of the debris, if you will, that's not to say that that's going to turn out to hold true when this is all said and done. It may just be that due to the number of citizens we have out moving, we're finding more of this debris right now, and we're receiving more reports of it. I can't speak for NASA in terms of how they're treating us. I think they're trying to address every county's needs as best they can. I certainly think NASA realizes that there is a significant amount of debris on the ground here in Nacogdoches County. Thank you. I have a sworn force, and that's almost a deceptive question in itself. I have a sworn force of 16 patrol deputies, 5 transport officers. I have 30 reserve officers, and I have about 50 jail employees. In addition to that, I have another 18 officers assigned to a narcotics task force, and that's my direct resources. Well, obviously, we have tried to make an effort to relieve all of our personnel for some period of time. I have personnel much like myself that are going on 2 or 3 hours of rest, but for the most part, we've tried to streamline the patrol efforts and the search efforts on 12-hour shifts right now. Our dispatchers, we're trying to rotate them out on 8-hour shifts. Those numbers I gave you didn't include the civilian support personnel such as dispatch, but we're trying to rotate them out on at least 8-hour shifts because of the burnout factor that they stand to have. And then we have all the additional assistance that's been offered from every fine agency that's come to help us.
Sheriff Thomas Kearse of Nacogdoches County in Texas talking about the recovery effort. He says some 523 pieces of debris have already been recovered. They're determining what to do with that. We'll continue to monitor what he says. He'll be back in an hour or two with more information. We are continuing our special coverage, Columbia, the shuttle tragedy. When we come back, we'll speak with Senator Bill Nelson, himself a former astronaut. But before we go to that, let's check all the latest developments. CNN's Anderson Cooper is standing by for that at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Anderson?
Well, thanks very much. As you just said, special coverage of Columbia, the shuttle tragedy, will continue after a check of the day's headlines. The day after the Columbia tragedy, space exploration goes on. Russia today launched an unmanned cargo ship to the International Space Station. The spacecraft is full of fuel, equipment, and food for the 2 astronauts and 1 cosmonaut. It's due to arrive Tuesday. With the U.S. space program on hold for now, it'll be up to Russia to provide for the space station.
Live picture of the cavernous vehicle assembly building at the Kennedy Space Center. I'm Miles O'Brien, live at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Before yesterday's tragedy of Columbia, NASA, some 17 years after this Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, was getting ready to open the door once again to allowing civilians to fly in space. An educator mission specialist program was just recently announced. The understudy to Krista McAuliffe, the teacher who died on Challenger, was set to fly at the end of this year. All that now, hard to predict where that will lead and whether that educator mission specialist program will ever come to fruition, at least for the foreseeable future. Someone who knows a lot about bringing civilians into space and bringing others besides professional astronauts up there is Senator Bill Nelson, who himself flew on the space shuttle just prior to the Challenger accident. At that time, he was Congressman Bill Nelson, in addition to being astronaut Bill Nelson. Senator Nelson, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Miles.
I'm curious if you knew what you know now about Challenger and about Columbia most recently, would you have flown?
Yes, I would, and that question was put to me 17 years ago. right after we had returned to Earth, and 10 days later, Challenger launched and blew up. And I said at the time, yes. And any crew member, I think, we're prepared to take that risk. You never want to have to face the consequences of what this nation did yesterday, nor what it did 17 years ago.
Senator Nelson, Congress holds the purse strings for NASA. Congress, in many ways, is NASA's boss. And inevitably, there will be a discussion out of this about how much NASA should be funded. Should there be another orbiter built? And in fact, has it been so poorly funded in recent years that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't as safe as it should be? What are your thoughts?
Well, clearly, the administration has been delaying the safety upgrades on the space shuttle. That is inexcusable, although that delay in those upgrades I don't think has any connection with yesterday's tragedy. Ironically, out of this tragedy, we will now probably see the safety upgrades sped up. But we're going to have a robust space program, and it's going to require an increase in NASA's budget that has not been given for the last 12 years. The spending today is almost the same in real dollars as it was 12 years ago.
And as a fraction of the federal budget, just a small fraction of a percentage point, and yet it remains one of those things that is the ultimate in discretionary spending, and thus it's a difficult political battle for supporters of the space program when they go to Congress, particularly when the committee that looks after their budget also is in charge of veterans. And if the choice becomes between space and veterans, it's politically, that's a no-brainer.
And a whole host of other needs, such as the environment, is in that same subcommittee. But regardless of that, the space program is the embodiment of the hopes and dreams of almost all Americans. The fact that we are adventurers and explorers by nature. We never want to give that up, Miles, or else we're going to be a second-rate country. And that's why we'll continue to have a robust space program.
But what kinds of dollars are we talking about? The Space Shuttle program in and of itself is about a $3 billion a year operation. They've been complaining for years that they want to make some significant upgrades for it to fly. It's been flying many more years than it was anticipated. And those long-range upgrades have not been performed. We're talking about some real money here if you're going to start looking at that fleet and upgrading it to fly for a significant period of time into the future, like the B-52 is still flying.
Well, I've suggested, Miles, that we've got to give NASA some relief, and if the White House will not increase NASA's budget, then some of the items, such as the technologies developing for a future space plane, could be borne by an agency that is flush with cash, such as the Defense Department, still having NASA do the overall program management.
But Senator, as you well know, that concerns an awful lot of people when you talk about putting the space program under the aegis of the Pentagon. A lot of people would like to see a firewall between the civilian space agency and the military space efforts.
That's why the development of the technologies should be under NASA. And I think that, to his credit, NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe, I think he's moving in that direction, and I commend him for it. And that's the only way we're going to free up money so that you can put it into the shuttle safety upgrades.
All right, very quickly, Senator, any doubt that the U.S. will be flying shuttles, maybe not soon, but in the foreseeable future?
Lord, I hope we're not down for 2.5 years like we were after the Challenger tragedy. We need to get back up and flying, and if NASA can find it, fix the problem, we can be up and flying and using that magnificent platform, the space station, for the science that we need.
Well, hopefully we won't have to abandon that space station. I guess that is a distinct possibility. All right. Senator Bill Nelson, Republican of Florida, thank you very much for being with us. Senator Bill Nelson.
Thanks, Miles. Democrat of Florida.
My apologies. I knew that. And thank you for correcting me on that. It's been a long
Thanks, Miles.
Days. Thank you. My apologies. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to check in with Elizabeth Cohen, who I know for a fact is in Amarillo, Texas. Rick Husband, the commander of the Space Shuttle Columbia, was the pride of Amarillo. We'll check in with her in just a bit.
I'm Darren Kagan, live at the Kennedy Space Center. I want to share with you something that the Orlando Sentinel put out. It is a special 8-page edition with coverage of what took place. And when you look inside, you see these large pictures of all 7 of the astronauts and their stories. And looking over their stories, I think it strikes me one reason this hit so many of us in the gut. When you read about these people, these were 7 people who had not only had incredible dreams, but literally reached for the stars to make those dreams come true. No one typifies that more than the commander of this mission, and that was Rick Husband. Tried to be an astronaut not once, 4 times before he was finally accepted to the program to make the dream of becoming an astronaut come true. I want to take you now to Rick Husband's hometown, and that is Amarillo, Texas, and that's where we find our Elizabeth Cohen. Elizabeth.
Darren, I'm here at the Polk Street United Methodist Church in Amarillo. This is the church where Rick Husband grew up. He was a hero in this town and certainly a hero in this church. He was in the choir as a little boy, and the parishioners remember how he used to wave down from the choir to his parents. They remember a very happy boy, and they remember a boy who had a goal. At age 4, he said, I want to be an astronaut, and he did everything that he could to make that happen. Now, I have here with me Ellen Robertson-Neal. Ellen is a television producer who did a documentary about Rick Husband for KCB, the local PBS station, and you became friends with Rick as well over the years. Tell me, how did you hear about the tragedy yesterday?
I was out walking with my neighbor, and her husband came to get us, and we hadn't walked very far, but it certainly was a long ride home. You couldn't know Rick and not realize what a treasure we've lost.
And tell me, what do you remember about him in particular?
I remember how he welcomed us into his home, how he was not arrogant at all. He was certainly the commander of the shuttle, but you would think he was your child's little league soccer coach when you were in his home. I've done 1,000 stories, and no family has ever welcomed me into their home and loved me like the husbands have.
And you got to know Evelyn as well. Exactly. And you talked to her about some of her excitement and anxieties about these shuttles.
I think any shuttle family is, of course, excited for their family member, but also very wary of the liftoff and the landing. And they knew the dangers, but they knew how much Rick wanted to fly, and they were willing to love him through that.
And can you tell me, in your documentary, you said to Rick, what's the message of your life? What was his answer?
I did. I said, what would you like to leave us with? And he said he wants people to know that he's very thankful that he became an astronaut, but if you achieve your goals without having a relationship with your family and your God along the way, then it means nothing.
Okay, thank you. Ellen Robertson-Neal, who did a documentary and was a close friend. Darren, again, here at the hometown church. Back to you, Darren.
Elizabeth Cohen, thank you so much. A lot of tears, but a lot of pride there as well in their hometown hero, in Rick Husband. Texan through and through, also a little bit of Californian in him. He got his master's degree in mechanical engineering at Fresno State. Carried a Bulldog sweatshirt with him up on board the shuttle to take a picture to show the folks down in Fresno. He was proud of his ties there as well. We have a lot more ahead, including where I have a chance to talk with the man who was the commander of the first joint space mission between the U.S. and Russia. He's just ahead. Also, more news headlines. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
I think every astronaut feels the same way, though. You know, there's a lot of people that have gone before us, and the people have the courage to do the things that they did. They know the danger, and we're all proud of them.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage, Columbia, the shuttle tragedy. I'm Wolf Blitzer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The news conference from the NASA officials has been delayed till 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Central Time. CNN, of course, will have live coverage when the NASA officials come out and answer our questions. But joining us now, retired U.S. Marine Corps Major General Charles Bolden. He's a former astronaut, former Assistant Deputy Director of NASA. General, thanks so much for joining us. When you first heard or saw on TV what was going on, more than 24 hours ago. What immediately went through your mind?
I was kind of numb. I was actually out riding my motorcycle across the Texas countryside, and it was sort of deja vu with the Challenger accident, and that, you know, they reported that the shuttle was overdue, and in spite of what I know, I kept hoping that, well, maybe something had caused them to go into a holding pattern or something. And
but you wouldn't lose communication.
You wouldn't do anything.
So I was just hoping
you
feared the worst.
I knew the worst. Yeah.
Did you think it had anything to do with that left wing and the tile?
No, I did not, because believe it or not, at the time, I really had put the left wing out of my mind. I had no idea that that it would have anything to do with the vehicle breaking up. I actually thought that because I wasn't at home, I was listening on NPR, and I actually thought that the shuttle was on its final approach and perhaps had not been talked to or something like that, but I had no idea that it was.
And obviously the investigation is just beginning. Exactly. Could be any one of thousands of causes. They'll be looking at it. What are they going to specifically do as they collect all this debris that we've been seeing?
It'll be just like any aircraft accident. They'll try to get as much as they can. They'll try to assemble it in some place, probably a hangar there at Shreveport,
at Barksdale.
And then they'll try to reconstruct the shuttle to the best they can using the technology that's available now. They'll go over it with a fine-tooth comb and find every area that looks unusual, burning, breakage, that kind of thing, to try to help determine what the primary cause was.
You know, for years, critics have said this whole space shuttle program is not safe, it's dangerous, and something else should take place. It's technology from the 60s and 70s, and it's endangering people's lives.
I have heard that over and over and over again, but it's like anything that we do that's exploration. Exploration is risky business. Going into space is risky business. I think shuttle is actually safer than many of the other things we do. But what we have to do is demonstrate that there is some return on this investment for the American public in order to get their faith again in the program.
It took 2.5 years after the Challenger exploded to get back on track.
And most of that time was political time. You know, we knew what had happened. I think you know very well. We knew what had happened the next day. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't jumping to a conclusion and that there was not a secondary cause. So that's what actually took us the 2.5 years. This time, I think we'll find out in relatively quick order what caused the accident. But it will still take us sometimes to comb through the evidence and make sure that we're not missing it.
If, in fact, the space shuttle is endangered as a program, the whole International Space Station is effectively endangered as a program, is effectively over as a program.
I won't go that far. I mean, there's still a way to, I think there's always a way to salvage something that's worthwhile. I think the International Space Station is extremely vital to the future of space exploration. So I think we will find a way to be successful. I think we'll find what happened with Shuttle, and we'll be back flying again in relatively short order. Okay. Now, what's to be determined is what is relatively short order. I don't think it'll take us 3.5 years.
2.5 years.
I don't think it'll take us 2.5 years. I think in a matter of months we will be comfortable that we know what happened. Now, the thing that I always caution people on is, you know, when we go through everything, we may find, if it is in fact the debris that came off the external tank, some people would say, okay, that's an act of God. We know how to fix that. We can fix it. We've had 2 flights now in a row where we lost Sophie spray-on foam insulation off the external tank. We'll figure out why. Was there a process change or something? We can fix that. And then we've got to have confidence in our technical ability to say we've solved that problem and go fly again. We say, you know, that was a fluke that day because of something else, and let's go fly.
General Baldwin, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much.
And our condolences to the entire NASA family. I know you're still very close. You live here in the area.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it very much. We have much more coverage. Our special coverage will continue. We'll go back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Gary Tuckman is standing by. He's got some visitors there, and we're going to get their reaction to what's happened. Stay with us.
We're taking a look there at the launch pad where Shuttle Columbia took off about on January 16th. Certainly the investigation into what went wrong with the descent will take a look at what happened as it took off. Did something fly into the left wing to damage the shuttle that ended up turning it into a day of doom yesterday? This is my first visit to the Kennedy Space Center, and I think you have to come here to realize just how huge this facility is. If we can take that other shot where you can see the launch pad, that's just one of 2 launch pads. They alternate for shuttle launches. That's it up close. And then if you come back to me and look over my left shoulder, that's that same launch pad. That's about 2 or 3 miles away from where we stand here. This is just one part of the Kennedy Space Center. A whole other part, about 5 or 6 miles away from me, is Gary Tuckman at the Visitor Center, where people come from all over the world to learn more about the space shuttle and just the space program in general. Gary, hello.
Well, hello to you, Darren. And it's right, hundreds of tourists came here yesterday to watch the landing of the Space Shuttle Columbia. Now, many of those people and hundreds of others have come here to mourn the loss of the 7 astronauts aboard the Columbia. Behind me, this black wall is the astronaut memorial wall that was built in 1991. Every name of every U.S. astronaut who's died in duty of his or her country is up there. And right here is a book, a remembrance book, that people are signing right now to give what they want to say to the families of those who lost their loved ones aboard the Columbia. We want to give you a look now at how long this line is. There are right now about 75 people waiting in line in the hot, and I do say hot, February Florida sun, waiting to get a chance to sign the book. We want to talk with someone right here. Can I ask you, sir, where you're from?
I'm from Tampa, Florida.
Okay, you're from Tampa, Florida. Tell me what made you decide... Oh, Sanford, Florida, which is near Orlando. Tell me what made you decide to come here today.
To pay my respects.
You have a flower, you're going to leave here. Lots of people have flowers. What are you going to say in the book when you sign it?
Certainly is a tragedy.
My respects to the astronauts. Basically, that's it.
Makes you sad.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for talking with us, sir. Thank you. We do want to tell you that normally when you come to this area here in the tourist area of the Kennedy Space Center, you have to pay a fee. That fee has been waived for today and for the indefinite time being. Darren, back to you.
Gary Tuckman with us here at the Kennedy Space Center. Gary, thank you very much. We're going to have much more from here in Florida, also in Houston, and all across the U.S., and also Israel and India. Stay with us. We'll be back after this.
Raumfahrt war immer mit dem Risiko verbunden, dass die Astronauten nicht von ihrer Mission zurückkehren könnten. 17 Jahre sind vergangen seit der Challenger-Katastrophe, 17 Jahre, in denen die Flüge scheinbar Routine waren. Daher hat die Katastrophe einen tiefen Schock verursacht.
Dass man wirklich sagen kann und muss, dass viele Menschen in Deutschland mit den Opfern, mit ihren Angehörigen trauern, und das geht sicher uns allen auch so.
Auch im Vatikan löste die Nachricht vom Absturz der Columbia tiefe Trauer aus. In dieser Zeit extremer Prüfungen bin ich geistig eng mit den Hinterbliebenen der Opfer verbunden. Und ich versichere Ihnen, dass ich sie in meine Gebete einschließen werde. In den USA werden mehrere Expertenteams rund um die Uhr alle Puzzlestücke der Raumfähre, alle Daten, die bis zum Absturz im Space Center in Houston eingegangen sind, auswerten, um die Unglücksursache herauszufinden.
Auf der ganzen Welt ist die Anteilnahme am Schicksal der Astronauten und ihrer Hinterbliebenen riesengroß. Die Raumfahrer, sie waren für viele Menschen mehr als Wissenschaftler auf Expedition. In ihren Heimatländern werden sie von vielen als Helden verehrt. Silke Teichmann über die weltweite Trauer.
Tiefe Trauer und Fassungslosigkeit sind diesen Menschen ins Gesicht geschrieben. Hunderte, darunter viele NASA-Mitarbeiter, waren in der Nacht zum NASA-Zentrum in Houston gekommen, um Abschied zu nehmen. Etliche kannten die 7 verunglückten Astronauten persönlich. Ich kann das alles noch nicht begreifen, dass meine Freunde und Kollegen auf einmal nicht mehr da sind. Unser Mitgefühl ist bei den Familien, die ihre Angehörigen verloren haben. Die meisten Angehörigen der Crew hatten im NASA-Zentrum in Florida auf ihre Männer, Frauen, Söhne und Töchter gewartet oder erlebten die Katastrophe vor dem Fernseher mit, wie die Eltern von Astronaut David Brown. Wenn sie Asche oder Überreste finden, ich glaube, erst dann werde ich kapieren, dass er tot ist. Auch in der nordindischen Stadt Karnal tiefe Trauer. Die 41 Jahre alte Astronautin Kaplana Chawla ging hier früher zur Schule. Sie war der Stolz des Landes. Auch für Israel ist das Unglück mehr als der Tod ihres Astronauten. Ilan Ramon hatte gute Nachrichten nach Israel bringen wollen. Freude und Stolz in einer Zeit von Terrorangst. Beim letzten Gespräch mit seiner Frau hatte Ilan Ramon gesagt, wie friedlich Israel von oben aussieht und dass er sich in der Raumfähre als Teil des Universums fühlte. Nach dem Unglück sagte seine Frau, nun wird er für immer ein Teil des Universums sein. Mama, wie kann man im Weltall sterben? Menschen sterben doch nur auf der Erde, fragte Ramons 5-jährige Tochter Noah hier Archivbilder, ihre Mutter nach dem Unglück. Mit Noahs Vater starb für Israel auch ein Hoffnungsschimmer.
We're saddened to report that there are some people who, despite the warnings, have been picking up some of these pieces, and we should tell you that's not a good idea. A shuttle is a toxic brew of volatile chemicals, and you can be burned and suffer other serious health consequences. And what's more, those pieces are very important to investigators as they try to determine what happened to the Space Shuttle Columbia. CNN's Maria Hinojosa is in the midst of that debris field in Hemphill, Texas. Maria?
Hi, Miles. Well, the search today has taken on a very different kind of feel. Yesterday, they really were depending on the phone calls that were coming into this area of Hemphill. Over 500 phone calls that they received. Today, they've got between 100 and 300 people who are out combing a 250 square mile radius, all coming out of this command center. What they're doing is they are literally going through, separated in one long line, men separated between 15 to 20 feet, literally combing through the very deep forest of the Sabine National Forest. And they're trying to find all of those pieces of the wreckage that, of course, were not visible, that did not land in people's yards or in their farms. But this is going to take quite a bit of time to do that. It's very difficult work, very particular work, very painstaking work. We have also seen many men who are out on their dune buggies going up and down through the highways trying to see if they spot anything there. We also know that there have been human remains that have been found in this area of Hemphill. In fact, part of the area that they have decided to look through is separated by basically a triangle between Route 96 South and Route 83, where two human remains were found. And in that area is what they're using essentially as their triangle to search northwest into this part of Texas through the forest. Now, the human remains that were found here were in fact taken to Luffolk, Texas by Hearst. They were taken there because that is the closest area where they have a forensic medical examiner. They were taken there by escort by the sheriffs. And as of right now, we're expecting a news conference any moment. We have not heard anything yet about any other recovery of human remains now. What we do know is that they have, in fact, brought in divers that are going to be going into the Toledo Bend Reservoir. It's a pretty large reservoir area. They have apparently found debris the size of a small compact car. The divers are going to be going underwater. They will be putting a GPS on this to mark it. They will not be, as far as we know today, removing that. They will be leaving it there, searching for more underwater, and then the EPA will be doing the final removals. Now, what we can tell you, we were just at a spot up the road here that actually had several pieces of debris, Miles. But last night, after the police had come and marked off this area where we had seen a large round piece about this big, between 9:30 and 10:30 last night, after it was cordoned off with police tape, someone came in and stole that piece of the debris. We have heard lots of people talking, of course, not to touch the debris, but I can tell you that I have seen people touching the debris. Much of it is small, it's scattered, it looks pretty non-threatening, so people are thinking, well, why can't I touch it and move it from one place to another? We also know that there are 8 people here in Hemphill who are in the hospital as of this morning that were being treated because of inhalation problems or burn problems. We've heard of other hospitals around the area treating several people that are complaining of the same thing. But again, we have seen people that are actually touching this stuff. We have heard of cases where people are not wanting to even call the authorities to let them know. They kind of feel that this has landed in their property and it's theirs. So the message continues to go out that this is, of course, federal property. It is a felony. But I have seen people, in fact, saying that they didn't plan on calling in to say that they have this material. Wolf.
Maria Hinojosa, thanks very much, Maria, for that report. One of the astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia, of course, was an Israeli colonel, Israeli Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon, the pride of Israel, a nation now in shock, grieving. CNN's Gerald Kessel looks at the reaction to what happened just more than 24 hours ago.
When Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon headed for Columbia's blast-off, he was a rare symbol of hope and pride for Israelis, battered and buffeted by more than 2 years of deadly conflict. Now, in the tails of smoke over Texas, those hopes have vanished.
We had a little bit of a moment of pride, a moment of light, and it seems to be taken away from us. It's awful.
Remnants of a dream, this banner headline. Weeping for Ilan, the message here, as students, from the very youngest, talked about the tragedy, seeking, like all Israelis, to come to grips with the pain that has replaced the innocent hope.
Because he was a representative of the country in this issue, it was more hurting than anyone that was killed in a car bomb or something like that.
From space, Ilan Ramon spoke of the vulnerability of the planet, of the smallness of his own country, feelings resonating all the more with his fellow Israelis now.
We thought that this hope will bring us a little bit smile to the face, because this period is very difficult for us in Israel. We hope that this project will continue with other Israeli astronauts.
Ariel Sharon sent condolences to the people of the United States. The Prime Minister called Ramon a bold pilot who did not, he said, deserve to be taken from us, along with our hopes and dreams. But with US Ambassador Dan Kurtz at his side, Sharon insisted the tragedy should not mean the end of the brave endeavor.
Their deaths are not in vain. Man's journey into space will continue. Cooperation between the United States and Israel in this field will continue. The day will come when we will launch more Israeli astronauts into space.
Flags are at half-staff as Israel mourns, together with its best friend, the United States. For a while, Ilan Ramon's space journey diverted some of Israel's attention from their searing conflict with the Palestinians, from their domestic political turmoil. Now, in a troubled region, even as they mourn, those issues return to be confronted with greater intensity. Gerald Kessel, CNN, Jerusalem.
And joining us now here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston is Israel's ambassador to the United States, Daniel Ayalon. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. Our condolences to you. You've come here because Colonel Ramon leaves behind a wife and 4 young children. You're spending time with them. First of all, how are they doing?
Yes, we came here from Washington first and foremost to be with the family, to be with Rona, the wife, just to hug her, to hold her hands, to look at her eyes and be together. And we had a very painful and emotional meeting last night, but she struck me also as very resilient, very proud and very strong person. She was very proud of her husband, of what he did. She said how confident she is that he died so happy.
How old are the children and how are they doing?
They have 4 children. The oldest is 15, the youngest is 5. Their second child is going to have his bar mitzvah in 2 months in February. And we have now families also from Israel who's coming to be with her here in Houston.
They had been living here as he trained for this mission over the past several years, but I assume they'll be going back to Israel now.
Yes, correct, Wolf. They've been here for the last 2.5 years. They made many great friends here among the Houston community with NASA. And of course, they will have to think about their future and going back to Israel. I think that first and foremost, they will stay here and we will be here with them to find out about possible remains. It's very important for us to bring Ilan to a burial, and we are going to meet with NASA officials in an hour and to get the status briefing.
So whatever remains they might find would be taken back to Israel for burial in Israel, is that right?
Yes, yes. And Wolf, I would also like to say that we have great confidence in NASA. They have been dealing with us with the utmost sensitivity and professionalism, updating us, and of course we will continue the cooperations with them for future endeavors as well.
Is there a sense, though, that there was a lapse in security, not necessarily security, but in safety procedures that resulted in this tragedy?
Not necessarily. We are now just grieving, collecting up the pieces, and we're so grateful for the United States being our friend and ally of allowing us to have this, participation. We will keep doing that. We are now have a bond, a blood, I would say, allegiance, and we will continue that. Wolf, there are few events in a nation history that galvanized, that pulled the people together. We had 2 of them, one very happy 2 weeks ago with the launch, and a very sad and tragic one with the return of Colombia. But I think it also galvanized our 2 nations, Israel and the United States. We are grieving both, but we are also very proud of the excellence, of the achievements, and no doubt that we will continue to try and expand the envelope of knowledge for the betterment of humankind, both here and in Israel and for the entire international community.
From joy to sorrow, all within the span of only 16 days. I know you have a tight schedule. One quick question. When I interviewed Sean O'Keefe, the administrator of NASA, I asked him if there was any indication whatsoever to suspect foul play, terrorism. Has the Israeli government come up with anything along those lines at all? Has that totally been removed?
Well, certainly, Wolf, given this nature of the times with this global terrorism hitting everywhere, it crosses one's mind when something like that happens. But we pretty much rule it out. The altitude and the speed pretty much precludes any outside influence on the shuttle.
All right. Ambassador Ayalon, our condolences to you, to all of the people of Israel. Thank you very much for joining us.
And the same to you and to the American people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Daniel Ayalon, Israel's ambassador to the United States. He's here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center trying to bring some comfort to the family of Colonel Ilan Ramon, one of those 7 astronauts. When we come back, Brian Cabell will be joining us. He's up in Racine, Wisconsin. He's talking to the family of another astronaut who was killed in the Columbia Shuttle tragedy. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage, Columbia, the Shuttle tragedy. I'm Wolf Blitzer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This note, 4:30 p.m. Eastern today, a few hours from now, there will be a briefing here at the Johnson Space Center. NASA officials coming in to answer our questions, news media questions about the tragedy that occurred yesterday. Let's check in now with CNN's Anderson Cooper at the CNN Center in Atlanta for a quick check of all the other day's news.
Anderson, hello. This seems like it is indeed such a sad story to cover because it is the ending of lives that came entirely too soon. And yet when you look at each astronaut's lives and realize what they did and how they lived, you can't help but smile because they lived life to the fullest. Take Laurel Clark, for instance. She was one of the 2 female astronauts on board this flight. It was her first shuttle flight. When you look at her resume, just a couple things: undersea medical officer, diving medical officer, submarine medical officer. She also was a trainer and hyperbaric chamber advisor. So she was an astronaut, a doctor, a wife, and a mother. It sounds like something that came out of a Danielle Steele novel. An incredible woman, an incredible life, even though it was a life that ended too soon at age 41. I want to take you now to her hometown, and that is Racine, Wisconsin, and our Brian Cabell is standing by live there. Brian, hello.
Hello. Laurel Clark was moved around a lot as a child, she and her family, but they finally settled in Racine, Wisconsin. And she's always considered this to be her hometown. She worked at a McDonald's here. She went to high school here, graduated in 1979. In fact, at the high school's anniversary next year, they were planning to have her as a keynote speaker. Behind me here is the church. They had church services here a little while ago, Unitarian Universalist church that she attended, she and her family. And we were at the service a little while ago, and the Reverend here spoke of the email that she had sent from space on Friday. And she described her journey there as awe-inspiring, she said, as magical. And she also wanted to thank her friends for all the support that they had given her through all her adventures. And of course, her last adventure came up some 17 days ago, and everybody was concerned about the launch. Launched, no problems, of course, and everybody assumed everything would be fine. We talked to her brother this morning, who said he assumed everything was fine, but again, it was 17 days ago when those first anxieties came up.
When the thing lit off and started going up, that's when I really started to just worry that, the scene of the Challenger plays through your mind, and I wanted to get through that. And we all just willed it up into space, and they had the main engine cut off after 8.5 minutes or so, and it was just a big sigh of relief. And okay, the hard part's over. Now they've just got 16 hard days of work, and come on back and give her a big hug. And I don't think any of us ever thought about the landing.
Of course, she was a medical doctor during her life. She was a Navy surgeon. She had several tours of duty in submarines. And then finally, of course, she was an astronaut for the last few years, her lifelong goal. Her father, at the age of when she was 9 months old, said that she suddenly got up one day, pulled herself up by a chair, and started walking. Fell down, got up again, and started walking again. This all on her own. He described her as a young child, as an infant, as a very determined little girl. And of course, she became a very determined woman. Died at the age of 41. Darren.
Brian Cabell, thank you so much from Racine, Wisconsin, the hometown of Laurel Clark. Appreciate that report. Now we toss it back to Houston and Wolf Blitzer. Wolf? Oh, actually, we're going to go back to Miles in Houston. Sorry about that, Miles.
That's okay, Darren, no problem at all. As a matter of fact, this is an opportunity for us to talk to someone who has an awful lot of experience on space shuttles. John Blaha is an astronaut who flew 5 times, first in 1989, and then on his last flight spent a significant amount of time as the 3rd U.S. occupant on board the Russian space station Mir. John Blaha joining us now from San Antonio, Texas. Good to have you with us, sir.
Good morning.
I'm just curious what your thoughts were yesterday as you watched this event unfold. Something that astronauts think about more than average people are the risks involved. And I know that many astronauts have always felt that it's just a sort of a matter of time before something like this happens.
Oh, well, for myself, my son called me up and told me, Dad, you need to turn the TV on. I turned it on at 8:15 Central Time and looked on CNN, and I saw that instead of a vehicle with one plasma trail, there were several vehicles with plasma trails, so I knew then that there had been a structural breakup of that vehicle, and my heart goes out to the families and all of the NASA team who are now digging out of this tragedy.
Give us a sense then of what is in the mind of an astronaut during a shuttle mission, and fully aware of the risks, and having gone through all those simulator training sessions that an astronaut goes through, going through every possible scenario for failure modes. Those astronauts fully aware of what the risks were and what they encountered and what they faced?
Yes, I believe you are. NASA has a tremendous training program that prepares you. They have 1 million, if you will, recovery plans that are automated and procedures that the crew trains on to perform. Certainly when there's a structural breakup of the vehicle in this regime of flight, just like there was in the ascent phase 17 years ago, you can't prevent that when that occurs. But it's just a tragic event and a very unfortunate thing for NASA. But, you know, the NASA team will figure this one out, and I'm confident that they'll fix the processes and the machines, and we'll get back to flying again just like we did after the Challenger tragedy.
Well, what's your sense of it, Mr. Blaha? Is it a situation, do you think, where maybe there was a process that went awry? Or is there something more inherent? Is NASA in general flying the shuttle fleet safely, or was it flying the shuttle fleet safely?
You know, my answer to that, I left NASA about 5 years ago, but I know the people who are some of the leaders in the program today. I will tell you what, they put so much emphasis on safety and the processing of our vehicles and the test procedures and checking out and making sure the vehicle is safe. And as you know, many teams of people are on the ground monitoring data throughout the missions. So I think the vehicles are safe as human beings know how to make them. Certainly out of this tragedy, we may learn there was something else we still didn't understand about a reusable space vehicle, and we will therefore make vehicles even more safe for human beings to fly to space.
I know the unknown, the engineers call them the unknown unknowns. Prior to Challenger, though, there was that whole issue of really negligence, of ignoring the data which was there, which told them very clearly that they were skirting some safety issues. I've had the sense personally that the specter of Challenger changed the way this agency did business. Is that an accurate assessment?
I think overall, we certainly, after Challenger, just like the agency did after Apollo 1, we learned something, so we focused and made the whole system safer. So I don't think I don't like the word negligence myself. I think human beings are trying to do the best they can within the bounds of human knowledge. Certainly when tragedies occur, it allows us to look deeper into something, and then we increase our knowledge, and then we make the process changes and the equipment changes necessary to make space flight safe so that we can in fact go there and get the tremendous benefits that we gain in knowledge by going to space.
Now, it's so terribly early, and we often find ourselves bordering on speculation here, but we have been talking quite a bit about that piece of foam, or whatever it was, debris, that fell off that external tank and struck the left wing on ascent. I know shuttle astronauts I've spoken with, I just talked to Norm Thaggart a few moments ago, anybody who's ridden a shuttle to space has seen that foam break off. It's not an uncommon thing. Are we making a mistake if we focus too much on that right now, or do you think it's just too much of a coincidence to see something strike the left wing and then see the left wing fail on re-entry?
Well, you know, anything is possible. I know one thing, over the months to come, we will learn with our technical expertise at NASA and in our industry team here in America, we will learn the sequence of events that caused this structural failure of this vehicle. Just like we learned the sequence of events that caused the structural failure of the booster seal during the Challenger accident. And certainly anything's possible right now, and I wouldn't speculate on what that sequence is going to turn out to be.
John Blaha, 5-time shuttle flyer, a former resident of the space station Mir. Thank you very much for being with us. We do appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
And we're going to be back with more in just a moment. When we come back, we're going to be taking a look at the 3 people who are in space. You know now the 7 occupants of the Space Shuttle Columbia. You know who Ken Bowersox is? Don Pettit? How about Nikolai Budarin? They're up there in space. The question is, when are they coming home, and by what means?
This is CNN.
Welcome back to our special coverage, Columbia, the shuttle tragedy. I'm Wolf Blitzer at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This note, 3 hours from now, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. on the West Coast. There will be a briefing here at the Johnson Space Center, a NASA news briefing. Executives, officials from NASA will be answering reporters' questions. What went wrong yesterday? What's next for the shuttle? What's next for the U.S. space program? CNN, of course, will have live coverage, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Darren Kagan is standing by at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida with more on what's happening there. Darren?
Yes, Wolf, and even though that news conference will be taking place in Houston, a lot of those same questions being asked right here at the Kennedy Space Center. We decided to bring along our Miami Bureau Chief, John Zarella, who has covered the space program for a number of years, to talk about those questions, mainly, John, hello, by the way.
Darren.
What is next? And there's some very specific questions that need to be answered, not just looking at the whole program of NASA, but specifically about the space shuttle program.
Well, and you know, the questions are already being asked. Where do you go from here? It's going to be a political debate. It's going to be a dollars and cents debate. Can you get along with 3 shuttles once you get past this problem to service the International Space Station? Will it require building a 4th orbiter like Ronald Reagan did after the 86?
Because they had that same decision to make. They made the decision to go with a 4th, but now all these years later, that might not be the right decision.
That might not be. There's plans to build an advanced space vehicle, eventually do away with the shuttles 20 years down the road. So do you put your eggs in a 4th shuttle, or do you go ahead and start pressing the case for a new vehicle? The playing field is different than it was in 86. In 86, the pressure was to get it all right. Make sure before you fly, you get it right.
Take your time.
Right. And
different pressures, international pressures this time around.
Exactly. Much different international pressures, because now you've got 3 astronauts flying on the International Space Station. Eventually, you've got to figure out, as Miles was saying a little while ago, how do you get them back? How do you change out the crew? You need a space vehicle, a space shuttle, to do that. So NASA is going to be pressed this time more than it was in 1986, when they took 2.5+ years to get it right before they flew again, to perhaps fly more quickly this time, because you've also got international agreements.
Right.
Canada, Japan, the Russians, the European Space Agency, they're all players now, and they weren't the players that today that they were, in 1986. They didn't have that commitment, the U.S. Space Agency, to those groups.
That's what happens when you take on other players, kind of expand the family business. It's beyond just the U.S. right now.
You're trying to bring other people into the picture, make it a global space agency, an international space station. So our commitment is not just to the United States. The United States commitment is to these other nations that are partners in these programs. So, yeah, there's going to be some serious issues, Darren, that have to be dealt with as to how quickly you fly again, and what do you do after you start flying again. Do you build another orbiter, or you do quickly step up the pace? And that means a lot of funding. And is the will going to be there in Congress to do that?
Real quickly, I want to ask you about those 3 astronauts that are up there right now. A lot of concern from them, but at least when I was talking to NASA officials here, they were saying, hold on, we do have a lot of things to worry about. That is one that actually is pretty much taken care of, both in terms of what happened today with the Russians launching that progress module, as they call it, with extra supplies. But they're pretty convinced that the astronauts are safe up there and will have a safe way to get back down.
Yeah, they'll be okay. That doesn't seem to be an immediate concern at all. They are fine through up until June, so they can get through the spring. They just won't be visited by a space shuttle. They'll be alone up there, no other company, but they'll be fine, and I'm sure they'll be able to get them back.
All right. John Zarella, great to have your perspective here and all your years of experience covering the space program. We're going to have a lot more from here at the Kennedy Space Center. Right now, we're going to get a quick break, and we'll be back after this.
The crew of the International Space Station was notified by flight controllers here in Houston about the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia about an hour after it happened. The response from the commander, Ken Bowersox, was that they were ready to stay as long as the supplies held out, ready to do their duty on behalf of NASA, on behalf of their mission of space exploration. Big questions now about what happens to that space station. NASA is very proud of the fact that it has been continuously manned now for a couple of years. The question is, without the space shuttle to ferry crews back and forth, supplies as well, where does that leave the space station crew? Might they have to leave on that Soyuz capsule, which is attached to the International Space Station, which serves essentially as their lifeboat, and perhaps mothball the space station for a period of time, leave it unmanned or unpiloted? Renee San Miguel joining us now from Atlanta with more on Ken Bowersox, Nikolai Budarin, and Don Pettit.
Well, Miles, indeed, even with the American Space Shuttle fleet grounded, we still have Americans in space, and we still had the launch of a spacecraft today, this one from Russia. There you see Ken Bowersox, the commander of the International Space Station Expedition 6, Science Officer Don Pettit, and Flight Engineer Nikolai Budarin. The Progress 10 cargo ship that launched today from Kazakhstan, the Baikonur Cosmodrome, is scheduled to dock with the ISS on Tuesday. They've been up there for 69 days, the 6th crew to man the ISS since the ISS opened for business in November of 2000. They have enough food up there, according to Don Ditmore, shuttle program manager, last until June. Yes, the shuttle Atlantis was scheduled to dock up there on March 1st and bring that crew home and bring up a replacement crew, but they are that now obviously been put on hold. The crews did say that they could last out. They will stay up there for as long as they have to while NASA decides what they want to do. But I wanted to show you, we have a model here of the ISS, what would happen in case there is some kind of an emergency or they do need to bring Expedition 6 back home. This is the Soyuz lifeboat right here that is docked to the ISS. The Soyuz being, of course, the primary Russian space vehicle through the 70s and 80s. It was a Soyuz like this that docked with the Apollo during that historic meeting of the space programs, if you will, in space in 1975. It's a 3-person spacecraft, so it could bring those 3 back home. But, you know, NASA really wants to have the shuttles, the shuttle fleet, dealing with the ISS. It can bring more people, it can bring more cargo, and it has enough boost in its rockets to lift the ISS into orbits. Because of the degradation of the orbit, it needs every once in a while to be lifted back up into a better orbit so it won't go tumbling out of control. And it's a very important, this is kind of a symbol of pride, if you will, of the Russian and American space programs. It needs to, NASA really wants to keep this in space, so there are some key questions that have to be resolved here in the near future. But for the moment, that crew can be taken care of, can come back home, if you will, if it has to, using this Soyuz lifeboat. Miles?
Hi, CNN's Renee San Miguel joining us from Atlanta. We should point out that the crew on board the space station currently has enough supplies and food and so forth to last through June. As Renee pointed out, an unmanned Progress freighter launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome is on its way, and they can continue to supply them that way for the foreseeable future. But the question becomes, how long can you keep them up there? And a lot of that will have to do with what comes out of the investigation, which is just obviously at its earliest stages right now. The meeting's going on right here, right now in Houston, the best and brightest of NASA, the real, no-kidding rocket scientists. Joining us now to talk about how this investigation might play out and exactly how NASA goes about finding the causes in situations like this is Norm Thagard, veteran shuttle astronaut, a man who spent a significant amount of time on the Russian space station Mir. Norm, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Miles.
Give us a sense. NASA really takes this process of learning how things go wrong to a science, literally.
To a science, and they will do it very exactly according to rules that they already have in place, if not before, certainly since Challenger, and it'll be methodical.
So give us a sense of what's going on behind closed doors now, these so-called mission management team meetings. They were burning the midnight oil last night, the engineers going over this captured data. How do they go about just sifting through all this and trying to, in a coherent fashion, come up with a way of putting the puzzle together?
Well, you'll have your usual layers of management, and you'll have your teams, and they'll present their results to groups, and finally it all gets filtered back to the highest level of management.
I've heard it described as fault trees, where they kind of go through and go down little routes, and if it leads to a dead end, it leads to others. It's a very organized thing. It actually comes out as kind of laid out in a schematic almost, isn't it?
Well, I'm sure it is. Now, after the Challenger accident, my role became to be the casualty assistance officer for the Scobie family, so I didn't actually go on one of those teams, although later on I got involved with some of them.
Give us a sense, in those dark days, what parallels you find to today, and what things may be different 17 years hence?
Well, the parallel is, of course, we've lost another shuttle and another crew, and you've got all of the same feelings, especially for those folks who knew the people on the crew, and I knew 4 of the 7 folks on Challenger. The difference, I think, is in those days, we thought we had a real problem with NASA. I don't think there's that thought today. I think the thought is this is an accident, it's got a cause, we'll find what it is and we'll correct it.
So sort of perhaps a one-off, a fluke, if you will, if we can use that term. I don't know if that's a correct scientific term, the way NASA would accept it, but not something that reveals a NASA that has some real fundamental issues at its core.
That's exactly the case. I don't think we have a systematic problem here with NASA, because NASA does everything it can these days to be safe, but nonetheless, you've got to find out what happened.
Norm Thagard, who will be spending a lot of time with us all throughout the coming days, we appreciate you being with us here and helping us have some insights on what lies ahead for this investigation and for space travel in general. And for more on that, we're going to check in with a couple of senators who are in charge of NASA's purse strings, at least partially in charge of that. Senator George Allen, Virginia, Senator John Breaux of Louisiana will be Wolf's guests in just a moment. Stay with us.
This is Mission Control Houston. A space shuttle contingency has been declared in Mission Control as a result of the loss of communication with the Space Shuttle Columbia.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage. Columbia, the shuttle tragedy. Joining us now, 2 key members of the United States Senate, both members of the Senate Commerce, Science, and Technology Committee in Washington. Senator George Allen, Republican of Virginia, and Senator John Breaux, Democrat of Louisiana. Thanks, Senators, for coming in on this sad, very tragic day. Senator Breaux, first to you. Do you still have confidence in NASA?
Oh, I do. I think it's one of the most outstanding federal agencies that we have, but no agency is beyond legitimate scrutiny by the Congress. We just received a GAO report, I think last week, that looked at NASA's oversight of some of their private contractors and basically said it was inadequate and it was disturbing. I think these are the things that Congress looks at when we look at an agency to determine if they're doing everything they possibly can to make sure the program is being run correctly.
What about that, Senator Allen? How do you feel about NASA in the aftermath of what happened yesterday?
I think NASA has a lot of good people in it, the engineers, the scientists, the technicians, everyone. And clearly this is a tragedy that they all feel strongly about. They're going to determine what caused it, and when they do, we'll learn from it and we'll move forward stronger with greater innovation and greater safety. My concerns with with NASA is that unfortunately the funding has been level overall. In the area of aeronautics, it has been cut. And there's a lot of research and development that can improve our military capabilities as well as our competitive nature compared to the Europeans or the Japanese as far as aeronautics. And we're getting behind there, and that's a good source of not only security and safety, but also good jobs here at home.
Well, Senator Breaux, what about specifically the Shuttle program? Is this money well spent, the billions and billions of dollars at a time of economic instability in the United States, tight money, budget deficits? Is this money that should be spent specifically on the Shuttle program?
Wolf, the Shuttle program has been very important, along with the space station. We're learning things that are having real positive benefits right here on Earth in medical research and weather research and engineering. These things are very important investments that the United States should continue to make. But let us bear in mind that the Shuttle program now is over 20 years old. The equipment is getting older every day. We need some new systems. We need to be working much more quickly on a new system to replace the Shuttle system, and we're not doing that. I mean, this program is going to be around for a long time. As long as there are frontiers to explore, there are going to be explorers willing to do it, but we got to make sure they're doing it with the most modern, up-to-date, technologically correct equipment, and we need some new equipment.
But Senator Breaux, you know that doesn't come cheap. That requires billions and billions and billions of dollars. Some say that money is better spent on domestic economic problems right now on Earth as opposed to in outer space.
Well, you're correct, there's only so much money available. We're looking at a $670 billion tax cut. I mean, you know, that's money that could be used, at least a portion of it, to rebuild NASA, to look at the next generation shuttle that's going to bring men and women up to space and back. We have to be a little bit more careful, I think, about how we balance our money and how we set our spending priorities. That's going to be the real challenge for this Congress.
How high of a priority is space exploration for you, Senator Allen?
Well, I think you need to look at it as a high priority for our competitiveness, for our jobs, and also the advancement in the quality of our lives. I agree with Senator Breaux. Some of the benefits in medicine and pharmaceuticals and a variety of other areas are gleaned from the research and from what we learn on the space shuttle. So I think that's part of one of the key missions of the federal government, which is national defense. Clearly, it's also important to have research and development, education. It all fits in. NASA fits into all of that, whether it's space or in aeronautics. And I think it should be a priority. I think that what we need is a strategic plan, a blueprint of where we need to go. Senator Breaux is right on the next generation vehicle or plane, orbital plane, to get to the space station, and that clearly will remain a priority, and we need to upgrade. And the cost, you're right, it's estimated around $10 billion for whatever the next vehicle will be, but nevertheless, we can't just sit here and do nothing. We need to keep advancing, keep improving, and keep innovating.
Finally, to both of you, and I'll start with Senator Breaux, an investigation. NASA is going to have an investigation. An outside blue ribbon panel has already been named to have an investigation. What should Congress do, and what, if anything, should President Bush do as far as a presidential commission, which, of course, happened after the last disaster, as all of you remember, 17 years ago? First to Senator Breaux.
Well, Wolf, let me congratulate NASA for, I think, a different attitude that we've seen in this instance with Columbia than with the previous situation with the Challenger accident. They've been very open. They've been very direct. They've called for already an internal investigation as well as an external investigation, and I think that's very positive on their part. Of course, Congress will be involved, but we're not the technical experts, nor are we the scientists. But we can look at the overall blueprint for NASA to look at whether they're doing the proper job, whether we're funding them adequately. This is a legitimate role for Congress, and I'm certain that we will exercise that.
All right, what about that, Senator Allen?
Well, I agree. Congress obviously speaks for the people of America, and we'll look at very closely the independent as well as the internal report. The president clearly is going to want answers. We're going to want answers. The American people will want answers. And from that, we'll learn and we will move forward. This is a country that's always been one of adventure, of exploration, and we'll keep moving forward.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it right there. Senator Allen, Senator Breaux, always good to have both of you on our program. Much more coverage coming up. Stay with us.
You're looking at a live picture right now of a building they refer to as the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building here at the Kennedy Space Center. Inside that building right now is the Space Shuttle Atlantis. That was the next shuttle that was set to launch. March 1st was the date. In fact, next week they were supposed to take it out of the VAB and take it out to the launch pad. Of course, that, like so many plans at NASA here at the Kennedy Space Center, on hold right now. The story is about so much more than just the nuts and bolts of the shuttle. It is about people and the 7 people who lost their lives. Earlier, we went to the hometown of Laurel Clark. She was one of 2 women on board this shuttle mission. The other was Kalpana Chawla, a woman who very few Americans knew about before this tragedy took place. In India, in her home country, she is a national heroine, and that was true even before the shuttle broke apart yesterday. You're going to learn a lot more about Kalpana Chawla and all the shuttle astronauts if you stay with us here on CNN. A special edition of People in the News is coming up at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. That's when you'll get a good look at the lives and personalities, accomplishments, and families of all shuttle astronauts, all 7 shuttle astronauts. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. Right now we take a break. We'll be back after this.
Search is underway around this remote Texan town. Officials are scouring forests and fields in the hunt for debris from the space shuttle. They've already recovered hundreds of pieces, some small, some big. This huge chunk landed in a man's back garden. Police and National Guard have been called in to guard the pieces, which NASA scientists believe could hold the key to this tragedy. For many in this farming community, Saturday began with the sound of a sonic boom as Columbia re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by the violent shaking of their homes. Traveling at more than 12,000 miles an hour through a clear blue sky, the space shuttle suddenly sprouted several separate vapor trails. 10 minutes later, wreckage started cascading through the air.
Our whole house began to shake. We have an iron railing around our bed. Literally had to hang on to the bed not to be shook out. I lived in California, and the first thing I thought is, this is an earthquake. And then I thought, well, this can't be an earthquake. Heard 3 consecutive booms. It sounded like somebody was hitting our house with a sledgehammer.
The wreckage includes several body parts. Investigators are thought to be preparing a hangar at a nearby airport in which to store all they've recovered. But they've warned this is a search that will last for months and possibly years.
There's a number of remote areas, national forest, private forest property in our county, and there's debris that we're not going to find anytime soon.
Coming out of their crew quarters.
But it's not just here that the shock and the confusion is being felt. Tributes have been pouring in from around the world for the 7-strong team of astronauts, which included 41-year-old Laurel Clark, a former doctor and naval engineer. Across America, people are sharing in the relatives' grief.
She realized pretty early on she was a strong spirit, and it was good that she worked hard to get to what level she was at and was doing what she wanted to, and she was lucky.
Nobody here can believe that Columbia's voyage has ended in tragedy over Texas. The battle now is to establish what went so badly wrong 40 miles above the Earth.
David Willis reporting there from Texas. Well, across America, people have been trying to come to terms with the events of yesterday. Nowhere has the impact been felt more than in Florida, the spiritual home of America's space program, and the place where the astronauts trained for their flight. Our correspondent Nick Brandt is at Cape Canaveral, where Columbia had been due to end its journey.
This is a community which believes the future belongs to the brave, where the conquest of space is worth the risk of life. From early this morning, hundreds came to the astronaut memorial at Cape Canaveral's Kennedy Space Center, the spiritual home of America's space program, a place where grief spans the generations.
A program like this, lives are going to be lost. But it's for science, it's for the future, and the generations coming up to know and understand.
It's very somber and very sad with all the losses. We grew up watching the space program. Even her mother used to live over here and watch all the Apollo missions go off, and then we grew up with all the space shuttles, and when we were young, watched the Challenger disaster, everything going on, and to see another one be lost and 7 more lives lost is just really sad.
This monument commemorates the lives of 17 spacemen and women lost over the past 30 years. Another 7 names will soon be chiseled on the wall.
We've been through this before, and it hurts. And it takes a long, well, you don't ever get over it, but it takes a long time for the hurt to go away.
At church services this morning, people found it hard to contain their emotions. Virtually everyone here is connected in some way with the space program.
I want to ask all the people that are related to the space industry to come up and stand with me up here on the podium this morning.
Some members of this congregation were engineers who'd helped in the refit of Columbia. Privately, they told us their grief was tinged with guilt, that they'd somehow failed the crew. Here at Cape Canaveral, there are fears for the future of the local economy. 12,000 jobs were lost when the shuttle program was grounded the last time. But right now, people here are simply numb with shock and drawing comfort from their faith and their flag.
That report from Nick Brandt in Cape Canaveral. So just what went wrong? NASA says it will leave no stone unturned to find out what caused this tragedy. Our science correspondent David Shukman looks now at the focus of the investigation.
Was it here, in the first few dangerous minutes of Columbia's launch, that the mission was ultimately doomed? We do know that a piece of insulation came loose and hit the left wing, but did that lead to all this? The breakup of the spacecraft high over Texas? We may never know. As it prepared to land, the Columbia did all the right things. It maneuvered into the correct position, that's nose up. This is critically important to avoid burning up in the atmosphere. Now, maybe the leading edge of the left wing had been damaged by that insulation material and couldn't take the strain. But if it was, how come the first sign of trouble came from the back of the left wing? The sensors there suddenly failed. Or was the problem with the heat shield itself? It's made up of thousands of heat-resistant tiles. Were they damaged?
There are cameras on board the shuttle that show you where most of the tiles are, but underneath the wings, that's a very difficult area for the cameras to sense. So if there had been tiles missing on the underside of the wing, the astronauts would not have been aware of them.
So the investigators at Mission Control will gather all the data they can, but while they're working, the remaining 3 shuttles are grounded, which creates an immediate problem. The International Space Station, orbiting Earth, is meant to be expanding, but only the shuttles can bring it construction material. This is how it's meant to grow in the next few years. But without the shuttle, none of this will happen.
The International Space Station is dependent on space shuttles for its continued construction. And if there were a long hold-up on constructing the International Space Station, that would have serious implications for our future exploration of the solar system.
For the moment, the space station depends on Russia. Today, a cargo rocket was launched with supplies. No one on the space station will be stranded. But without the shuttle, all dreams of space travel are on hold. David Shukman, BBC News.
Meantime, Pope John Paul II extends his condolences in the wake of the shuttle disaster. During Mass at St. Peter's Square on Sunday, the pontiff invited all people to pray for the deceased.
The sorrowful news of the tragic explosion of the U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia when re-entering the atmosphere stirs up strong emotion in everyone. I invite all to pray for the victims of the accident, experts in carrying out an international scientific mission. In this moment of difficult trial, I am spiritually close to the families to whom I give assurances of remembrance and prayer.
In his remarks, the Pope also urged the two sides of the dispute in Ivory Coast to strive for peace and reconciliation. And stay tuned to CNN for continuing coverage of the Space Shuttle Columbia tragedy. You can also log on to our website for the latest information. Our online coverage includes audio, video and photo galleries, timelines, interactive animations and much, much more. That's all at cnn.com/shuttle.
Wahrscheinlich hat die Katastrophe mit der Isolierung der linken Tragfläche zu tun, die beim Start beschädigt wurde. Das Hitzeschild muss die Fähre beim Landeanflug gegen Temperaturen von über 2000 Grad schützen. Das Tor zum Weltraumzentrum in Houston als Altar spontaner Trauer. Im ganzen Land wurde heute für die Opfer gebetet. In den politischen Talkshows begann schon heute die Diskussion um die Zukunft der Raumfahrt. Das amerikanische Volk will den Weltraum erobern. Ich hoffe, dass daraus eine mutige neue Vision für die Raumfahrt entsteht. Über die Stationen im All, den Mond und den Mars hinaus. Solche Visionen sprechen vor allem dem konservativen Amerika aus der Seele, doch sie umzusetzen kostet Milliarden. Dabei war es die Partei von Präsident Bush, die das Budget der NASA in den letzten Jahren radikal zusammengestrichen hat. Ein Dilemma, das der Präsident im Blick haben muss, wenn er der Nation nach dem Unglück Trost spenden will.
Russland hat planmäßig einen Versorgungsflug zur internationalen Raumstation ISS gestartet. Der unbemannte Frachter Progress hob mit einer Sojus-Trägerrakete vom russischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab und erreichte problemlos die Umlaufbahn. Nach Ansicht von Experten muss die ISS vermutlich bald geräumt werden. Die russische Flotte könne den Ausfall der US-Raumflüge nicht wettmachen.
The Progress M47 cargo ship successfully blasted off from the Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It's on its way to the International Space Station, expected there on Tuesday. It is carrying food, fuel, and even letters to the three-man crew at the International Space Station. Now that the shuttle launches have been suspended following the Columbia disaster, it will be a challenge for the Russian Space Agency to keep the International Space Station supplied. It can do that for the next year. It has 5 missions planned. It has 3 cargo ships that are unmanned and 2 manned Soyuz rockets, 2 manned missions that it is planning. It is already looking at ways to make the best use of its resources. It is considering suspending a manned mission of a Soyuz rocket, which was scheduled to take place in April, in order to conserve supplies, not to take away supplies for the manned crew that is up on the International Space Station. Russia has a total of 5 missions that it has planned for the rest of the year, but it has little funding to either speed up or to make more spare rockets and more spare cargo ships to continue beyond that year to keep the space station supplied. And even if it can keep it supplied, keeping it up in orbit is another challenge for the Russian Space Agency. The International Space Station is constantly sinking little by little, and it needs to be boosted up so that it doesn't enter the atmosphere and fall back to Earth. Until now, this was done by a space shuttle, and now the Russian Space Agency has to figure out how to do it by itself. Theoretically, that is possible, but they will have to figure that out too. And in general, the Russian Space Agency is very much concerned about the long-term fate of the International Space Station. It all depends on how long the shuttle launches will be suspended. Relitsa Vasilova, CNN, Moscow.
The weather's concerned because it has been very cooperative. Of course, we saw those shots of the shuttle breaking up and the skies were as clear as could be. All of that, of course, because of this big area of high pressure that remains in place across, let's say, most of Texas and all the way over toward the southeastern U.S. Well, that is going to begin to change. You see the storm system coming across here over the Rockies and then moving into the plains. Well, this system will eventually sink a little bit farther to the south, and it looks like by late tomorrow, we may begin to see a little bit more rain coming across that way. The winds will probably going to pick up as well. And it looks like colder air moving in behind that. So this break in the weather that we've had so far is going to begin to change. Another area to watch is going to be across the northeastern U.S. That area of low pressure still bringing some very strong gusty winds across parts of New England and all the way down into places like New York. That system will be moving away. Here comes the storm I was telling you about, sinking a little bit farther to the south. By Monday evening, it will be past the Texas Panhandle, we think, moving into Arkansas, northern Louisiana. But notice western Texas begins to see the effects of that system as well, with increased cloud cover. Today, though, staying dry, as I showed you, 26 the high for Dallas, 20 and dry in Atlanta, and 24 the high for Miami.
Amerika steht immer noch unter Schock und die Experten suchen nach den Ursachen. Die NASA hat einen Bereich schon genauer im Visier, die linke Tragfläche der Columbia. Dort waren beim Eintritt in die Erdatmosphäre die Temperatursensoren ausgefallen. Eine mögliche Ursache, ein Fehler am Hitzeschild der Raumfähre. Doch selbst die besten Erklärungsversuche werden die kaum trösten können, die Söhne und Töchter am Himmel über Texas verloren haben. Thomas Walde über Amerika am Tag danach.
Die Grace Community Church in Clear Lake, Texas, gedachte heute Morgen der verstorbenen Astronauten. Der Kommandant der Columbia lebte hier und war regelmäßig in ihrer Kirche. Ebenso ein weiteres Besatzungsmitglied. Ganze 16 Minuten fehlten zu einem großen Erfolg. Stattdessen bringt uns heute eine Tragödie zusammen. Und jeder von uns in diesem Raum ist davon berührt. Darum sind wir heute hier. Es ist faszinierend. Die gesamte Welt schaut auf dieses Ereignis und es bringt unserer Nation einen großen Verlust und große Trauer. Auch Präsident Bush und seine Frau waren heute in Washington in der Kirche. Im ganzen Land wurde der toten Astronauten gedacht. Und vor dem Weißen Haus sagten einige, was viele Amerikaner bewegt. Es ist irgendwie alles zu viel. Jetzt kommt das noch zu all den anderen Dingen, die wir gerade in der Welt haben, hinzu. Es ist so schade, weil so viele neue Astronauten an Bord waren. Es ist so schrecklich, dass sie zum ersten Mal die Möglichkeit hatten, da hochzugehen und nicht die Erfahrung hinterher haben durften. Man denkt an die Familien. Die Angehörigen konnten das Unglück immer noch nicht recht fassen, weil es so plötzlich kam. Wir waren bis dahin glücklich, weil alles so gut geklappt hatte. Bei 113 Flügen hatte die NASA nie ein Problem mit der Landung. Wir haben das so nicht erwartet. Das ist, was David immer tun wollte. Nicht ins Weltall zu können, wäre für ihn eine riesige Enttäuschung gewesen. Sicher hatte ich auch Angst, aber das ist, was er immer tun wollte. Den ganzen Tag über fanden Suchtrupps weitere Trümmerteile der abgestürzten Raumfähre. Die NASA hat bislang keine neuen Erkenntnisse über den Hergang der Katastrophe, aber jedes Teil könne beitragen, die Ursache herauszufinden. Wir sammeln so viele Beweisstücke, wie wir können. Wir haben eine Mannschaft im Osten Texas und im Westen Louisianas, die jedes einzelne Trümmerteil anschauen. Und wir stellen sicher, dass wir so viele Beobachtungen der Raumfähre beim Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre auswerten wie möglich. Doch noch hält der Schock an, auch vor dem Raumfahrtzentrum. Hier waren die Astronauten, Kollegen, Nachbarn, Freunde. Viele Menschen in Houston fühlen sich der Raumfahrt besonders verbunden. Ich bete Gott, dass in diesen Tagen der Trauer das Licht der Erlösung durchdringt. Ich bete, dass ihr Dasein nicht vergeblich war und dass es für alles einen Sinn gibt, den wir heute noch nicht erkennen können. Und so sind es die Trauer und der Blick nach vorn, die sie in schwieriger Zeit zusammenrücken lässt. Die NASA, die Familien, das ganze Land.
Die Columbia-Katastrophe hat an diesem Wochenende in den USA sogar den Irak-Konflikt aus den Schlagzeilen verdrängt.
Ein Amateurfilmer hält fest, was sich derweil am Himmel über Texas abspielt. Mehrere brennende Teile der Columbia stürzen unkontrolliert zur Erde. Jetzt wird klar, dass Mission 107 unrettbar verloren ist. Auch der deutsche Astronaut Ulrich Walter war 1993 Mitglied der Crew an Bord der Columbia. Er kann nachvollziehen, was beim Absturz an Bord geschah.
Das Video beim Wiederanflug zeigt ja, dass irgendwas abgebrochen ist. Deswegen glaube ich, es muss nicht sein, aber deswegen glaube ich, dass ein Teil des linken Fluges tatsächlich abgebrochen ist. Dadurch wurde das Shuttle instabil und dadurch kam es sozusagen erst zu dem Unfall.
Haben die Piloten, die Astronauten dies mitbekommen?
Ja, natürlich haben sie das mitbekommen. Man ist als Astronaut sehr empfindlich auf Fehler, die im Shuttle passieren. Jede Änderung des Flugzustands macht sich durch Rütteln und durch Schütteln deutlich. Das heißt, bereits in dem Zustand, wo die Hitze angegriffen hat und es zu Turbulenzen an der Kante kam, das merkt man als Astronaut sehr deutlich. Aber spätestens in dem Augenblick, wo die Spitze oder wo der Flügel abgerissen wurde oder jedes andere Teil, irgendwas ist abgebrochen, in dem Augenblick führt es zu Schrägbewegungen des Shuttles. Das heißt, es hat sich dann sicherlich gedreht und damit gerät natürlich der Shuttle außer Kontrolle und damit weiß man wirklich, hier ist was schiefgelaufen.
Die Columbia war die alte Dame unter den amerikanischen Raumfähren. Am 12. April 1981 hob das Space Shuttle zum ersten Mal vom Weltraumbahnhof in Cape Canaveral ab. Seither hatte die Columbia immer wieder mit technischen Problemen zu kämpfen. Defekte Brennstoffzellen, Versagen der Computer und 1999 eine beinahe Katastrophe, als der Start in letzter Sekunde abgebrochen wurde, nachdem zuvor ausströmender Wasserstoff entdeckt worden war. Trotzdem brachte sie es auf insgesamt 27 erfolgreiche Missionen, bevor die 28. im Inferno endete. Das Prinzip der Raumfähren war, sie wie ein Flugzeug zur Erde zurückzubringen. Kritisch ist wegen der enormen Hitzeentwicklung zwar die Phase des Wiedereintritts in die Erdatmosphäre. Doch wird die Landung allgemein als ungefährlichster Teil einer Mission betrachtet. Matthias Gründer ist Raumfahrtjournalist und Buchautor. Er kennt die Columbia gut und glaubt nicht, dass das Alter des Shuttles Ursache der Katastrophe ist.
Es ist bei uns sehr weit verbreitet, dass man verwechselt alt und modern. Ein Shuttle wie die Columbia war sicher rein körperlich alt, war aber vom Raumtransportsystem das modernste, was wir gegenwärtig haben. Und das darf man nicht verwechseln. Und man darf auch nicht verwechseln, dass ja hier die Maschine nicht 20 Jahre lang extensiv genutzt wurde. Sie ist in diesen 22 Jahren, die sie in Dienst ist, 28 Mal geflogen. Ist also kein Vergleich mit einem Passagierflugzeug, was rund um die Uhr unterwegs ist. Das heißt, diese Maschine hat wesentlich länger und wesentlich öfter in der Halle gestanden und ist gewartet, repariert und gepflegt worden. Deswegen darf man nicht den Fehler begehen und zu sagen, die Maschine war zu alt und nur deswegen war sie dafür prädestiniert, als erste auseinanderzufallen.
Vertrauen in eine Technik, das auch die 7 Astronauten der letzten Mission teilten. Und auch sie kannten die Gefahren und glaubten doch an die Mission. 28. Januar 1986. 7 Raumfahrer auf dem Weg zu ihrem Flug ins All. Das Shuttle, die Challenger.
And liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission and it has cleared the tower.
73 Sekunden nach dem Start kommt es zur Katastrophe. Vor den Augen der Weltöffentlichkeit explodiert die Challenger. Untersuchungen zeigten, dass eine defekte Dichtung zwischen den Segmenten einer Antriebsrakete das Inferno ausgelöst hat. Nach dem Unglück startete 2 Jahre lang kein Shuttle mehr ins All. Die Flaggen auf Halbmast auch heute Morgen im Deutschen Luft- und Raumfahrtzentrum in Köln. Vorstand Sigmar Wittig schließt aus, dass Vorschäden als Unfallursache für den Absturz der Columbia verantwortlich sind.
Es ist wahr, man hatte vor einiger Zeit Risse in einigen Brennstoffleitungen entdeckt. Die hat man überprüft und man hat nach ungefähr 3 Monaten, was auch eine Verzögerung war, das Ganze repariert. Und es gibt eigentlich keinen Hinweis, dass das Alter des Shuttles hier eine Rolle gespielt hat.
Tatsächlich war die NASA eher stolz auf die Leistungsfähigkeit ihrer betagten Vögel. Zu den rund 1500 Tonnen Ladung, die die Shuttles im Laufe der Jahre ins All brachten, zählte vor ziemlich genau 10 Jahren auch Ulrich Walter. Gemeinsam mit seinem Landsmann Hans Schlegel war er für das Gelingen der 900 Millionen Mark teuren deutsch-amerikanischen D2-Mission verantwortlich. 1,5 Wochen dauerte sein Flug an Bord der Columbia.
Ich habe mich an meine eigene Situation erinnert, als ich da drin saß und dann gelandet bin. Wissen Sie, ich war 10 Tage da oben, Sie waren 16 Tage da oben. Man ist kaputt, man ist ausgelaugt, man freut sich auf zu Hause. Man ahnt in dieser Situation überhaupt nichts Schlimmes, denn man weiß von der NASA, es ist einer mit der zuverlässigsten und sichersten Situation der gesamten Mission. Und umso überraschender kam wahrscheinlich für die Astronauten dieser Umstand, dass auf einmal was passierte. Es wird wahrscheinlich sehr stark geruckt haben, dann hat es einen Ruck gegeben zur Seite und dann wird wahrscheinlich alles so schnell gegangen sein, dass sie sehr schnell das Bewusstsein verloren haben.
Die Mission der letzten Crew der Columbia. Sie stand ganz im Zeichen der Wissenschaft, aber auch der Politik. Denn die rund 80 Experimente, die die 5 Männer und 2 Frauen in 277 Kilometer Höhe durchführten, waren Routine. Außergewöhnlich dagegen die Nationalität eines Besatzungsmitgliedes. Zum ersten Mal flog mit dem 48-jährigen Ilan Ramon ein Israeli ins All.
Für Israel und die jüdische Gemeinde ist das ein symbolischer Tag.
Cape Canaveral, 16. Januar 2003, 10:39 Uhr. Gut möglich, dass die Katastrophe in diesen Sekunden ihren Ausgang nimmt. Schon damals bemerkten Fachleute auf TV-Bildern, wie ein kleines Teil des Tankes wegbricht und gegen das Shuttle prallt. Das Urteil der NASA nicht schwerwiegend.
Sie sehen hier den Aufstieg. Der entscheidende Punkt ist hier an dieser Stelle. Hier, was Sie hier oben sehen, das ist dieser externe Tank. Er hat eine Isolierschicht aus einer Art Schaum, einen relativ leichten Schaum. Allerdings ist er relativ porös. Das heißt, je nachdem, wie nun dieser Schaum konstruiert ist, kann sich mal ein Teil ablösen. Das ist abgelöst und hat sich dann hier an diesen Flügel ist er aufgeschlagen. Das heißt, beim Aufstieg löst sich ein Teil und schlägt dann auf den Flügel, der sich tiefer befindet. Das heißt, er muss sozusagen auf den Flügel fallen. Da passt ein anderes Mosaiksteinchen. Es könnte sozusagen nirgendwo anders aufschlagen, höchstens noch auf das Seitenleitwerk. Das heißt, die herausstehenden Teile sind die Flügel und das Seitenleitwerk, falls so ein Teil abfällt. Und deswegen glaube ich eben durchaus, dass dieser Flügel in Mitleidenschaft gezogen war und dann bei der Landung das Problem verursacht hat.
Originalaufnahmen der Unglücksmission. Die Astronauten wiegen sich in Sicherheit. Raumanzüge für Außenbordbesichtigungen sind nicht vorhanden. Man arbeitet sich durchs normale Programm. Dazu gehört eine Gedenkminute für die Challenger-Opfer und eine Live-Schaltung nach Israel zum Premierminister.
First of all, it's great to be here in space, and secondly, we are so busy in all the experiments that I didn't even had the chance to think about Sabbath.
Eine Woche später. Die Columbia hat ihre Aufträge erfüllt, bis auf einen, die Rückkehr zur Erde. In rund 100 Kilometer Höhe trifft das Raumfahrzeug auf die Erdatmosphäre. Das 20.000 Kacheln umfassende Schutzschild der Fähre beginnt sich aufzuheizen. 40 Grad beträgt der Anflugwinkel in das Höllenfeuer.
Er hat eine Geschwindigkeit von 28.000 Stundenkilometern und fliegt also schräg mit der Unterseite voran, die wir von Bildern als den schwarzen Bauch kennen sozusagen, bis er so weit abgebremst ist, dass er also normal wie ein Flugzeug weiterfliegen kann. Diese schwarze Unterseite besteht aus speziellen Hitzeschutzkacheln, die bis zu 2000 Grad abhalten können, die allerdings im Falle des Eintauchens in die Atmosphäre nicht mehr schwarz sind, sondern hellrot glühend. Die weiße Oberseite, wie wir sie von den Bildern oder von den Filmen her kennen, ist abgesichert bis zu Temperaturen von etwa 600 Grad Celsius, weil die heiße Luft, das Plasma, was dort von unten entgegenkommt, natürlich an dem Orbiter vorbeifließt und die Oberseite gar nicht trifft. Das heißt, dort muss gar nicht so sehr abgesichert sein.
Doch dass etwas schief lief, bemerkte man auch im Kontrollzentrum.
Die ersten Hinweise auf ein ernsthaftes Problem kamen ein paar Minuten vor 8 Central Standard Time. Die ersten Anzeichen waren der Verlust von Temperatursensoren im Hydrauliksystem des linken Flügels sowie der Verlust von Temperatursensoren innen- und außenbords der linken Seite der Fähre. Sekunden und Minuten später kamen weitere Probleme hinzu, wie zum Beispiel nachlassender Druck im linken Haupttriebwerk, gefolgt von Anzeichen extremer Erhitzung der ganzen Struktur.
Der Zeitpunkt, zu dem der Orbiter auseinandergebrochen sein muss. In 60 Kilometer Höhe, noch rund 2250 Kilometer von seinem Landeplatz in Florida entfernt. Für die Crew gibt es nicht den Hauch einer Überlebenschance. Zumindest jetzt nicht mehr. Vor Beginn des Rückfluges wäre das noch anders gewesen, vermuten Experten.
Man hätte was tun können, nur die NASA hat aufgrund von Erfahrungen gehandelt. Denn es ist nicht das erste Mal, dass Kacheln beschädigt wurden. Es war normalerweise auf der Unterseite und die Erfahrung hat bisher gelehrt, dass es eigentlich nicht so der darauf ankommt, wenn eine Kachel auf der Unterseite beschädigt ist. Die Erfahrung hat gelehrt, es macht bei der Landung nichts. Dieses Mal war es allerdings so, dass nicht auf der Unterseite die Kachel abgebrochen war, sondern auf dem Flügel. Und das ist eine sehr kritische Stelle. Und da hätte man, meine ich, ein bisschen vorsichtiger vorgehen müssen.
6 der 7 Astronauten waren verheiratet, 5 hatten Kinder. Der Vater von Ilan Ramon erlebt live mit, wie sein Sohn stirbt. Der 79-Jährige ist eigens in einem Jerusalemer Fernsehstudio anlässlich der Landung zugeschaltet, als der Korrespondent vor Ort von Schwierigkeiten kündet. Minuten später tritt Ramons Bruder vor die Kameras.
Ich kann nicht glauben, was passiert ist. Diese Mission war das reine Glück für ihn, der Höhepunkt seines Lebens. Dass so etwas passieren musste.
An mehr als 800 Stellen sind in 4 US-Bundesstaaten inzwischen Trümmerteile der Columbia geborgen worden. Einzelne bis zu 1,5 Meter groß, andere von besonders ideellem Wert.
Ich suchte auf der einen Seite der Straße nach irgendwelchen Fundstücken vom Space Shuttle. Und dann trat ich auf etwas, ich dachte, es wäre ein Stück Müll. Doch als ich nach unten sah, erkannte ich, dass es ein Abzeichen war, das Abzeichen einer Raumflugmission. Ich sah darauf die Namen aller Crewmitglieder und das Symbol für diese Mission. In dem Moment musste ich gegen die Tränen ankämpfen. Es ist so traurig. Man kann nur schwer damit umgehen.
Auch mehrere Leichenteile wurden bereits entdeckt. Opfer der bemannten Raumfahrt, die aber, so Präsident Bush, auf keinen Fall so enden soll.
Hello and welcome to World News. I'm Rosemary Church at the CNN Center. Well, the head of the US space agency NASA is vowing to find and fix whatever caused the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia and its 7-person crew. Well, let's take a look now at the latest developments. And NASA says it received indications of excessive structural heating and a loss of sensors on the left side of the shuttle before it broke apart. Investigators are expected to arrive soon at the plant that built the external fuel tanks for the shuttle. A piece of foam broke off the Columbia's tanks and hit its left wing during takeoff. And an external and independent board has been set up to look into the accident. That board is scheduled to hold its first meeting Monday at an airbase in the US state of Louisiana. Well, authorities searching for debris have found hundreds of fragments from the destroyed shuttle. Pieces have been found in the states of Texas and Louisiana. The fragments will be used to look into why the shuttle was lost. But one official says the effort won't be quick.
We're going to continue to find small pieces, and it may be years before, you know, all of it's up. I mean, some of them are so minute that there's no way that you'll ever find all of it.
NASA is working closely with several other US government agencies to investigate the cause of Columbia's disintegration. Patty Davis reports.
Strewn across several states is crucial to finding what caused the accident.
We're going to gather every piece we can find, treat this much like an aircraft incident, and see if we can solve the puzzle.
Finding the pieces is a massive undertaking, but an essential one. If the cause is structural, debris could provide the key clues.
They can then piece that together to figure out how it came apart, and then that'll help them figure out where the cause was.
That's why officials are appealing to the public to turn over any pictures people took of the shuttle falling and to turn in any pieces found.
If you find debris, please call local authorities immediately to tell them of the location.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating the federal government's response and recovery. The military guarding and searching for debris using planes, boats, and helicopters. The FAA instituting a 40-mile wide, 160-mile long restricted zone below 3,000 feet from Texas to Louisiana to protect aircraft involved in the recovery. The National Transportation Safety Board sending vehicle structure and system experts to help. NTSB crash investigators helped piece together debris from the in-flight breakup of the TWA 800 crash. This debris field as much as 100 times bigger.
This is going to be an extraordinarily challenging investigation.
The vehicle was at 200,000 feet. It was traveling at 12,500 miles per hour. There simply has never been a breakup like this in aviation or space history.
In addition to debris, NASA says the shuttle had data and voice recorders, but more importantly, it was constantly streaming information to mission control.
We are preserving hardware around the country in our different facilities. We are impounding data here that represented the last data that we received from the crew, and we will be poring over that data 24 hours a day.
Besides NASA's own investigation, an independent group, including the military and the FAA, will look into what happened. An investigation that could take months, if not years. Patty Davis, CNN, Washington.
Memorials for the fallen astronauts were held across the U.S. on Sunday. Many astronauts live and train in Texas. Columbia commander Rick Husband was from Houston. Memorials were also held in Florida, home of the Kennedy Space Center. President George W. Bush attended church near the White House, where the minister prayed for the spirit of the astronauts to be left alive or kept alive in all of us. Mr. Bush is planning to travel to Texas on Tuesday for a memorial service at the Johnson Space Center. Flags are flying at half-staff in Israel, where the country is mourning the death of its first person in space, Ilan Ramon, one of Columbia's 7 crew members. A special service was held at Ramon's old high school in the town of Beersheba. Children at other schools hung his picture and held memorials as well. Well, in India, the Columbia tragedy has had a special poignancy. One of the nation's heroes, Kalpana Chawla, the first Indian-born woman in space, was aboard the shuttle. And people in her hometown are taking her loss especially hard. Satinder Bindra has more.
They come to grieve. They come to promise. Kalpana Chawla will never be forgotten. In her hometown of Karnal, northern India, hundreds gather to pay their respects to the city's most famous citizen.
Of course, our city and our college and our students and our professors have lost a star, and the star will be shining in the sky for all times to come.
At Kalpana's old school, many students had gathered to welcome her back to Earth. Then news of the space shuttle's accident quickly transformed their joy into grief.
She never forgot that she was from Karnal, that she was from this school, and that is why it hurts so much.
What also hurts these mourners is Kalpana, who's better known here by her nickname Mantu, was only 41 and had so much to live for. Soon after graduating from this school in Karnal, Kalpana earned a bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering. Then in 1982, she migrated to the United States, where she received her PhD. In 1994, she was selected for the NASA program. From a small, simple town in northern India to the heart of America's space program, she had come a long way. Just before leaving on her first space mission in 1997, Kalpana asked the president of her former college in India for the school's flag, explaining she wanted to carry it with her in space. 5 years after that incident, it's still fresh in the minds of her friends. They tell me, for all her fame, Kalpana remained humble, never forgetting her roots. Months before her last and fatal space journey, Kalpana invited 2 students from her old school to visit NASA.
When I gone over there, she had just inspired us to follow our dreams.